Hey guys, tonight we're going deep into the scented haze of the ancient world, into places where incense thickens the air, where bodies shimmer in golden lamplight, and where pleasure isn't sinful but sacred. These temples were not quiet houses of worship with stiff robes and bowed heads. No, tonight's journey winds through rituals designed to awaken not just the soul but every part of you. And yes, just a heads up, you probably won't survive this in one piece. Emotionally, spiritually, maybe even physically, the ancients did not hold back. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Midnight in Toronto? 3 AM in Nairobi? I want to know. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in a time before clocks, before commandments, and long before the idea that a desire was dangerous. The land is hot and dry, Mesopotamia, cradle of civilization, and you're approaching a massive ziggurat, a stepped mountain of mud brick rising out of the baked earth like a stairway for gods, and it smells of sun-warmed clay and sweet-burning myrrh. A breeze slips through your robes as you step barefoot into the shadow of its great bulk. At its summit, the temple of Inanna waits. She is goddess of love and war, of heaven and hell. You walk past veiled figures draped in linen and gold, their eyes lined in thick kohl, their hands cupped with offerings of oil and pomegranate. They part for you, murmuring words in a tongue you do not know but somehow understand. This is no common place of worship, this is a threshold. Once you cross it, the rules of the world dissolve. Inside, the scent is overwhelming. Resin-rich smoke coils from bronze braziers, and rosewater drips from clay urns onto the temple floor. You pass statues of Inanna, some serene, others sensually arched, eyes closed, lips parted. The goddess is always watching but never judging. That's your first clue this temple plays by different rules. You're guided by a priestess, tall, androgynous, radiant. Her voice is deep, almost hypnotic, as she explains what's about to happen. You're not here to confess sins. You're here to remember the divine within your body. The temple teaches that the body is not a prison, but a temple itself, a gateway to the gods. If you're brave enough to walk through, she leads you to a quiet chamber, heavy with the scent of amber and cinnamon. Pillows are piled in every corner, and woven tapestries ripple faintly in the hot, perfumed air. The priestess pours oil into her palms, something thick with a scent like crushed blossoms and spice, and begins to anoint your arms, your neck, your chest. This isn't about seduction, it's about tuning your body like an instrument, preparing it for ritual. This was real. In Sumerian temple practice, especially in the city of Uruk, sexual rites were part of sacred duties. High priestesses and priests known as Entu participated in what modern scholars often call sacred marriage ceremonies, reenacting the union of the goddess Inanna and her consort Dumuzi. These weren't crude affairs, they were elaborately staged with music, wine and poetry. The physical union was symbolic of cosmic balance, fertile land and harmonious skies. You lie back on a woven mat as music drifts in. Reed flutes, hand drums, the distant hum of voices chanting hymns to the goddess. The priestess doesn't touch you now. Instead, she sits beside you, whispering a poem older than written language. You can feel the sound travel down your spine, words like honey and thunder. Words about longing, about blooming in the heat of the divine. And here's something weird. One cuneiform tablet recovered near Uruk describes an odd custom. During certain new moons, worshippers would leave offerings of sex toys. Yes, seriously, alongside cakes and beer. Some were carved from ivory, others moulded from bitumen, a kind of natural tar. Were they votive symbols or something more functional? That part remains a mystery. But even 5,000 years ago, someone thought pleasure deserved a place beside grain and goats. You begin to understand this ritual isn't just physical, it's elemental. Fire, earth, air, water. Desire, when channeled, becomes something transcendent. Not shameful, not hidden. Here it's as sacred as sunrise, and yet there's debate. Some scholars argue that sacred prostitution as we picture it may be more myth than fact. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote lurid tales of every woman in Babylon being required to sleep with a stranger at the temple once in her life. But modern archaeologists suggest he might have misunderstood or exaggerated a very different kind of initiation rite. The evidence is thin, scattered, open to interpretation. And maybe that's fitting. These rituals weren't made for dusty record-keeping. They were lived, felt, burned into memory, not clay. Back in the temple chamber, the priestess takes your hand and leads you out into the night air. The stars are blisteringly bright. From the rooftop, the whole city stretches below. Silent, dreaming, unaware. You feel weightless, flushed with something too complex to name. Aroused, yes, but also softened, opened, like something was unknotted deep in your chest. The priestess turns to you and says, "Now you are known to the goddess." Then she leaves, and you are alone with the stars. You exhale. The wind is warm. Somewhere far below, the city drums begin to beat again. By the time your feet find solid ground again, the city feels unreal, like you're still floating somewhere above it, wrapped in incense and myth. The dust of ancient Sumer clings faintly to your skin, but now the terrain shifts, and your path pulls westward, toward the lands of sun gods and monumental stone. The Nile stretches long and dark beneath a waxing moon, and in the far distance something impossible rises against the sky. Not the pyramids, not yet, but what lies beneath them. You arrive under cover of night, as most seekers of forbidden things often do. Giza looms, but you're not here for the tourist brochure version. The Sphinx watches from her timeless post, eyes fixed beyond your comprehension. You slip past guards that aren't there, down staircases no one mentions on the tours, and into a quiet chamber hidden deep beneath the limestone floor. The air here is cooler, metallic, thick with centuries of silence. Torchlight flickers over hieroglyphs, some well-known, some strikingly odd. They aren't about pharaohs or the journey to the underworld. These inscriptions pulse with another kind of energy. Soft curves, lotus flowers blooming in positions that would make a modern yoga teacher blush, and eyes everywhere watching. You run your fingers along a sandstone relief, its lines smoothed by time and touch. It depicts a woman reclining on a bed of lilies while a man, possibly a priest or scribe, kneels beside her, offering what looks like a vessel of perfume, or wine, or something else entirely. A carved inscription reads, "To awaken the eye is to feed the soul." What that actually meant is anyone's guess. But here's what we know. In ancient Egypt, pleasure was not considered sinful. Quite the opposite. The goddess Hathor, goddess of music, beauty, dance, and love, was worshipped with rituals that embraced sensuality as a divine force. At her temples, particularly at Dendera, festivals would unfold with song, drumming, intoxication, and, if the gods were pleased, acts of sacred intimacy in secluded chambers. You find yourself walking deeper into the stonework, guided now by a narrow corridor whose walls pulse with ancient memory. Candles light themselves in your imagination, casting a warm amber glow on carvings of Hathor herself, often depicted with a mirror or a sistrum, a musical rattle she used to stir joy and arousal alike. But here's where things get strange. Among the less public texts and fragments found buried in temple ruins are references to the mysteries of the night lotus. This was not a term used lightly. According to some fringe historians, yes, the kind who make serious academics cringe, these mysteries involved night-long ceremonies in subterranean chambers where priestesses of Hathor would guide initiates through a series of physical pleasures designed to unlock visions, dreams, even past lives. Whether you believe that or not, well, that's part of the magic. A hush falls as you approach a domed room carved directly into the rock beneath the pyramid. The ceiling is painted with stars, swirling constellations you don't recognize. In the center lies a platform of polished alabaster, still glowing faintly as if it remembers the bodies that once touched it. Around the edges, tall jars of unguents and oils stand like sentinels. Each one bears a label in gold paint. Desire, clarity, binding, release. You sit, you listen, you wait. Then comes the music, low, rhythmic, unmistakably erotic. It doesn't come from any visible source, it just begins to vibrate in the stone itself, as if the pyramid's geometry still holds the echo of those old ceremonies. You feel it in your chest, in your spine, in that secret place behind your eyes where dreams are born. In a dreamlike sequence, perhaps memory, perhaps magic, you witness a ritual unfold. A young initiate lies on the alabaster platform while three priestesses, dressed in gauzy linen robes, move slowly around them. One brushes the body with scented oil, another traces symbols on the skin with henna, and the third sings in a language you feel more than understand. The air thickens, the room hums. Suddenly, you recall that controversial passage from a lesser-known funerary scroll, a scene where the soul of the dead is led by Hathor into a garden filled with sweet fruit, cold wine, and acts of the body that unchain the heart. Scholars argue over its meaning. Some say it's metaphor, others say it's code for a rite of passage through erotic awakening. And of course, many dismiss it entirely. But here, beneath the pyramid, it feels anything but metaphorical. The priestesses, whether real or imagined, guide the initiate through an intricate dance of sensation and surrender. Every movement is deliberate. Every sigh is sacred. The ritual isn't about control, it's about releasing control, about learning that the body, when honoured, becomes a doorway to realms beyond even the most elaborate tombs. You wonder, was this real? Did rituals like these truly occur in the secret depths of Egypt's temples? Or are you chasing shadows drawn from misunderstood texts and overactive imaginations? Does it matter? Even modern researchers admit there's a gap between what was publicly displayed in temple art and what may have been practiced in private. And let's be honest, Egyptian culture was obsessed with balance, duality, and the intersection of life and death. It isn't so far-fetched to think they also explored the line between physical pleasure and spiritual transcendence. You stand, light-headed, awash in scent and warmth and something else, something almost like love, but purer. As you move to leave the chamber, the stone beneath your feet pulses once, just once. A quiet farewell from a temple that never truly sleeps. Back above ground, the stars are brighter than before. The pyramids no longer look like tombs. They feel alive, gigantic batteries humming with memory, with ritual, with forgotten bliss. You exhale, and your breath curls in the cool air. The Sphinx watches you go. The sun hasn't quite risen, but the sky is already beginning to blush at the horizon, a delicate pink blooming behind the jagged silhouettes of palm trees. The heat is a slow-building thing, creeping up from the earth and pressing gently against your skin. You're walking now, the ancient Nile far behind, the sands giving way to the crumbling stone avenues of Babylon. It's louder here, not just the wind or the birds, but people. The city buzzes, even before dawn, vendors setting up stalls, donkeys braying, children darting between clay houses. But your destination rises above all that, an immense stepped structure, grander than the ziggurat you saw in Sumer, as if the gods had demanded a second try with better architecture. This is the famed temple of Ishtar, and tonight it opens its doors for something entirely different. You're escorted in not as a mere spectator, but as a participant. This time there are no stairs to climb. You're led through a side entrance along smooth stone corridors adorned with golden tiles and lapis lazuli. Flowers spill from carved niches, petals drying in the heat, releasing their sleepy perfume. It's beautiful, yes, but there's a tension in the air like something's waiting. The priestess who meets you is impossibly graceful. She's older, but in that ageless, moonlit way. Her eyes glitter with something that could be knowledge or mischief, maybe both. She tells you the ritual begins when the moon is fully above the courtyard, and until then you must be washed, anointed, and taught the names of the goddess. You are led to a shallow pool surrounded by pillars etched with stories, some violent, others tender. You see Inanna descending into the underworld, shedding her clothes and titles at each gate. You see her return not as a queen, but as something fiercer, more primal. This goddess doesn't smile, she devours. As you submerge, the water is cool, almost startling. Then hands, many hands, begin to cleanse you. Not roughly, not invasively, just thoroughly. Hair, skin, fingertips, scented oils are worked into your scalp. One priestess hums while another brushes your lips with crushed dates and something bitter. It's not erotic in the way you might expect, it's reverent. You're not being prepared for pleasure. You're being prepared to become a vessel for the goddess herself. This is the heart of the temple's forbidden ritual. Sacred prostitution, or at least that's the term modern historians keep using, though never quite fits. The more accurate term might be hieros gamos, a sacred marriage, an embodied prayer through union. In Babylon, these rites weren't hidden, they were part of the religious calendar. Pilgrims travelled hundreds of miles to be blessed by the goddess. and to some that meant lying with one of her priestesses or priests in her name. One of the oldest tablets ever found, etched in Akkadian, describes a festival for Ishtar where the body and the barley both rise together. Subtle? Not really. The ritual was about fertility, of course, crops, livestock, lineage, but also pleasure. Pleasure as a force of cosmic alignment. You're taken to the central courtyard, which is open to the sky. Braziers smoke gently in each corner, and the air is thick with cinnamon and clove. In the centre stands a raised stone bed, not cold, but warm from the day's sun. You're told to lie down, not yet for the ritual, but for the telling of the story. The priestess sits beside you and begins to recite the song of Inanna and Dumuzi. Her voice is low, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. You feel the story more than hear it. Inanna, full of power, descends into darkness and finds her lover waiting. Their reunion is physical, stormy, ecstatic. She speaks of hands on hips, mouths like rivers, skin like date wine. It's not a metaphor. The story is graphic in a way that would shock modern clergy, but here, it's holy. And then, the stranger arrives. Not a priest, not a temple worker. Just another pilgrim, another vessel. This is how the ritual works. Two strangers, sometimes same sex, sometimes opposite, sometimes neither, are brought together to honour the goddess through their pleasure. It is not transactional. It is transformational. There is no money, only breath, contact, invocation, and here's your quirky fact. One tablet from Kish describes how priestesses would sometimes wear elaborate golden masks during these rites, representing the goddess herself. Not for anonymity, but for embodiment. Those who came seeking union believed they were not touching a woman or a man, but the divine. It's hard to know whether to call that beautiful or haunting. Your stranger lies beside you. Neither of you speak. It's not necessary. You both breathe the same sacred air. You both understand what this is. As hands meet and skin warms beneath the moonlight, there is no shame, no judgment. The temple walls do not flinch. You are not defiling the sacred. You're entering it. For the Babylonians, sexuality wasn't private or hidden. It was a portal, and pleasure-leisure was a kind of worship. Of course, not everyone agrees. Modern scholars have debated the existence and exact nature of sacred prostitution for decades. Some claim it's a Western misinterpretation of temple service roles. Others argue that while the rituals may not have been widespread, they absolutely existed in elite circles deeply woven into agricultural and lunar cycles. Tonight, though, those debates fade into the flicker of firelight and soft breath. The priestess watches, not with judgment, but with a kind of maternal vigilance, as if she's ensuring that what unfolds is worthy of the goddess, that it is real, that it is ritual, and when it's done, when the last sigh fades into the night, she blesses you both with oil across the forehead and whispers something that might be your name, or hers. You rise, not cleansed, not dirtied, just opened. As you leave the temple, the sky is lightening. Babylon begins to wake, but you already have. The road away from Babylon is long, dusty, and mostly silent, as if the world itself is still digesting what you just experienced. Your limbs are heavy in that pleasant way, like you've been wrung out and reassembled with softer edges. The memory of the ritual hums just beneath your skin, and though you try not to overthink it, a question clings to you like the desert heat. If that was worship, what isn't? You travel northwest now, away from the crescent of civilization and towards stony hills where the wind sings through olive trees and oracles breathe steam in high places. It's quiet as you ascend the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the path curving through groves and ruins and echoes. Delphi waits. The temple appears not suddenly, but with a kind of reveal, like the slow turning of a page. You see it first through columns, weathered, slanted, refusing to fall. Then the white marble glows in the afternoon haze, sacred and sharp against the craggy terrain. And somewhere beneath it all, deep in the earth, a fissure exhales gases older than language. You've come for prophecy, maybe. But prophecy here doesn't come without a price. You're brought into the sanctuary by a temple attendant dressed in simple linen, her sandals silent against the stone. The light dims as you descend. It's cooler here, damp. The smell of mineral water and something faintly metallic fills the air. You pass walls etched with aphorisms like, "Know thyself, and nothing in excess." Good advice, sure, but tonight's ritual might just ignore that second one. You're taken to a smaller chamber, circular, domed, open to the vent that cuts through the earth. This is where the Pythia sits or lies or writhes, depending on who you ask. She's not just a woman, she's the voice of Apollo, his breath made flesh. You're told to wash your hands in a silver basin and place a small offering on the altar, grapes maybe, or a strip of clean cloth. The priest guiding you explains almost casually that before she became a prophetess, the Pythia was often said to have undergone sensual alignment, a process by which her senses were awakened to better channel the god's will. This part, of course, is left out of most modern guidebooks. It's whispered, debated, denied, but you're not here for the guidebooks. She appears like mist, young, older neither. Her robe is loose, her hair unbound, her skin dewed with the sweat of someone not entirely living in this world. She drinks a preparation of laurel leaf and barley wine, what some now believe was laced with psychoactive herbs, and lies back against a cushion near the fissure. The gas rises, not choking, not sharp. Sweet, strangely. It carries the scent of warm earth and crushed petals, and as she breathes it in, her body begins to move, slow and serpentine, a rhythm rising from her core that has nothing to do with dance and everything to do with transmission. You're told to ask your question. You hesitate. Then speak aloud something that feels far too personal, far too raw for a stranger, or a god to hear. Her eyes flutter, her fingers twitch, and then she answers. But it's not just the words, it's the tone, the way her voice lilts and dips, filled with subtle suggestion and intimate cadence. It feels like she's whispering directly into your spine. The answer is both vague and uncomfortably precise, something about choice and shadow, and what lies in your blood. You try to follow her meaning, but it shifts like silk in the wind, and underneath it all, there's something else. A hum of physical energy that feels almost erotic, though not in a carnal sense. More like a stirring of awareness. That's when the priest leans close and explains something that catches you off guard. In some earlier accounts, before Apollo took over the temple from the older earth goddess Gaia, the rites were more visceral, even erotic. Some say the early oracles were not alone when they prophesied, that the gas wasn't the only thing that induced trance. That touch, rhythm, and sacred union were once part of the experience. It sounds scandalous now, but remember, ancient Greeks didn't draw such a sharp line between the body and the divine. One lesser-known scroll found in a ruined temple annex tells of an ancient rite where the Pythia would be prepared by a ritual consort, a figure referred to only as the bearer of breath. Whether that preparation was physical, spiritual, or both is unclear, but it adds a very different context to the idea of divine possession. You sit now, legs crossed on a low cushion, watching as the Pythia slowly comes down from her trance. Her skin glows, her mouth is parted, she looks emptied. Or perhaps filled with something too vast to name. You're led to her side, she touches your hand, it's warm, alive, and she whispers a final phrase into your ear. Something you'll remember only when you need it most. That's how the old magic works. And here's your fringe fact. A fragment of text from a lost play suggests that one of the earlier temple chambers contained a mirror of skin, a surface made of stretched, polished animal hide that reflected not your image, but your inner form. Some believed gazing into it after the oracle's blessing could reveal who you truly were, or what the gods saw when they looked at you. You don't see the mirror tonight, but you feel its presence, just behind your eyes. When you step back into the light, the world feels too bright, too clean. You've inhaled something ancient and intimate, and now you have to live with it. The path down the mountain winds slowly, each step pressing you further into the waking world. And yet, you don't quite feel awake. You don't descend the mountain so much as it lets you go, loosened like a knot slowly unravelling in reverse. The air grows warmer as you return to the world of market stalls and midday noise, but part of you remains threaded into that cave beneath Delphi, and it stays with you as the land changes again. Now the soil is redder, the trees different. More mango, more neem. The sky here feels heavier, like it's watching. You've arrived in ancient India, before kingdoms were carved and borders were drawn, in a time when the Vedas weren't just texts but living breath. The village you enter is nestled near a wide river, the Ganges perhaps, its water slow and reflective, like it's been waiting for centuries just to show you your own face. You're brought to a fire circle at the edge of the temple compound, where a group of Brahmins sits cross-legged around a low flame. They're not what you expect. Some are young, one has a nose ring, a few are laughing. Their rituals begin not with chanting, but with listening. You're asked nothing, only welcomed. You are here to observe, to feel, maybe to forget what you think you know. And in this place, fire is more than fire. As twilight deepens, a quiet hush settles over the compound. The trees seem to lean in. The wind takes a breath. One of the Brahmins, older than the others, with a beard that touches his chest and eyes that refuse to blink, explains what's about to happen. You're not here for devotion in the way you've seen before. You're here to witness a tantric fire rite, one not often spoken of even in these circles. It's called Agni Mithuna, a pairing of sacred heat, not just literal fire, but the metaphysical flame that lives between two bodies in union. Pleasure in this tradition is not indulgence, it's discipline. Controlled fire, channeled upward, used to burn away illusion. The ritual begins slowly. 2 initiates, one male, one female, though gender seems almost beside the point, take their places across from each other. They are draped in saffron, bare-shouldered, their bodies marked with ash and sandalwood paste. They sit close to the fire, so close that its glow lights the hollows of their throats. They do not touch, not at first. Instead, they breathe in rhythm, eyes locked, breaths matched. Every inhale and exhale is intentional, like a spell being cast syllable by syllable, and you sit on the edge of it drawn in. Here's your historical truth. Tantric traditions, especially those found in early Shaiva and Shakta sects, often centered around rituals involving physical union not as a means to pleasure, but as a vehicle for enlightenment. The idea wasn't to chase sensation, but to master it, to ride its wave without drowning. These rituals were secretive, sometimes dangerous, and absolutely not for the uninitiated. And they were never just about sex, they were about death, rebirth, ego dissolution, divine union. The air around you thickens. The initiate couple begins to move, not toward each other, but in subtle, mirrored gestures. Fingers raise, shoulders shift, their bodies become calligraphy, writing prayers the mouth cannot say, and then finally, touch. Not grasping, not urgent, but reverent. Hands on shoulders, palms to heart, and now your quirky fact. One surviving tantric scroll describes a ritual in which couples would place copper coins beneath their tongues while engaging in breathwork and touch, believing the metal would anchor the soul to the vessel during heightened states. It sounds bizarre, but it's not unlike modern grounding techniques. Ancient mindfulness with a metallic twist. As the fire crackles, the energy in the circle changes. The couple's movements slow again. Their eyes remain locked, but their awareness seems to spread beyond the body. You feel it in your own chest, a tightening, an opening. One of the Brahmins softly begins to chant a mantra, Om Agni Devaya Namaha, to the fire god, the witness of all unions. You close your eyes just for a moment, and suddenly it's not just them. It's you. It's all of you. Breathing, opening, surrendering to something ancient and without name, you feel the heat not just on your skin but inside you, coiling like smoke through your spine. And then, almost anticlimactically, it ends. The couple leans forward and touches the fire with their foreheads, one after the other. The flame answers with a subtle flare, as if acknowledging their offering. They return to seated positions, unmoving. They say nothing. They don't need to. A silence settles that's deeper than before. The kind that wraps around your bones and makes even your thoughts feel too loud. Later, you're given spiced milk and a small handful of ghee-soaked sweets. A young acolyte sits beside you, smiling shyly. He tells you in a soft voice that the fire remembered you, that it knows your name now. You don't ask how. As you leave the compound, you glance back one last time. The fire is still burning. And somewhere in the depths of scholarly debate, academics still argue over whether these rites were symbolic or literal. Some say the sexual elements were always metaphorical, representing the union of Shiva and Shakti, not two humans. Others insist that physical union was essential, but only when stripped of ego. The truth, as always, flickers somewhere between dogma and experience. You walk on, the scent of ash and jasmine still clinging to your skin. The night feels closer now. The stars seem to pulse. You begin to understand why they call it awakening. The road you follow next is carved with rhythm. You don't notice it at first, but the land hums beneath your feet, low and steady, like a distant drumbeat in the bones of the earth. You move south, deeper into India, where the air becomes thick with green and the temples no longer rise in steps but bloom, sculpted into towering spires like frozen flame. This is Tamilakam, ancient South India, and you are about to enter a temple not built for sermons, but for performance. Not for rites, but for song. The temple of Shiva at Chidambaram is waiting, golden-roofed and alive with the sound of ankle bells. You arrive at dusk, just as the oil lamps are being lit, casting golden halos against the walls etched with dancers, gods, and mad ecstatic serpents. In this place you don't just worship a deity, you become the deity, through movement, through devotion, through desire shaped into dance. Your guide this time is not a priest, but a girl no older than 20, with wide eyes and a spine like a drawn bow. She leads you through the inner courtyard, past processional statues and water tanks, and into a long corridor of pillars carved with contorted bodies, limbs arched, torsos twisted, lips slightly parted. Nothing in this temple is still. Everything is captured mid-motion. This, she says softly, is where the Devadasi dance. You've heard the word before in whispers and arguments: sacred dancer, temple courtisan, holy prostitute. Scholar debates rage around this word. But here, there is no shame attached to it. Here she says it like a title of honour, like queen or goddess. She leads you into a room behind the sanctum, quieter now, where a small group of women sit brushing their long hair, oiling their feet, preparing for something more than a performance. You're told this is the orangutrum, not a mere dance debut, but an offering. The body is the vessel, and the dance is the fire that fills it. The Devadasi tradition is ancient, rooted in centuries of worship to Shiva, Vishnu and other deities, with dances composed not for an audience, but for the gods themselves. These women, chosen young, trained in sacred texts and rigorous physical practice, were married not to men, but to the divine. Their art, their movement, their sensuality, all belong to the temple. The ritual tonight is for Shiva as Nataraja, the lord of dance, the god who destroys and creates in one eternal spinning gesture. You're seated just behind a curtain, near enough to see the dancers but not disturb them. Incense curls in slow ribbons through the air. Drums begin, mridangam, natuvangam, and the bells on the dancers' ankles jingle like rainfall. And then she begins. Your guide steps into the sanctum, bare feet brushing against rose petals scattered on the floor. Her arms rise, wrists flowing like water, fingers curved in ancient mudras that say everything without words. Her eyes flicker, now serene, now wild, now longing, and her hips begin to circle, not for flirtation, but to summon something. She's not just dancing, she's channeling. You feel it in your chest, the pull, the burn, the ache of worship made visible. Here's your historical anchor. Devadasis were not entertainers in the modern sense. They were custodians of a deeply embodied tradition that combined storytelling, spirituality, and sensual expression. Their performances, rooted in Bharatanatyam and other classical styles, conveyed myths of divine love, erotic yearning and cosmic union. And yes, their status often included intimate connections with temple patrons or royalty, but this was not prostitution in the way we understand it now. It was complex, sacred, political, dangerous. The dance intensifies, her feet slap the stone in rhythm, each beat an invocation. Her breath grows louder, her eyes blaze, and suddenly there's a shift, almost imperceptible. She's no longer herself, or maybe she's more herself. The line between woman and goddess thins until it flickers out altogether. You remember a fringe detail told to you earlier by a wandering musician. Some Devadasis were believed to be incarnations of celestial nymphs, Apsaras, who were born to serve the temple in mortal form. During certain festivals, villagers would lay garlands on the dancer's path, not to honour her performance, but to receive her blessing. Touching her feet was considered a spiritual act. Receiving her smile was like being kissed by the moon. Back in the sanctum, your dancer freezes in a final pose, arms lifted, one leg bent, chest lifted toward the heavens. Sweat gleams on her brow, her chest rises and falls, and then the lamps flicker, just once, as if Shiva himself exhaled. Silence, and then soft chanting, as the temple priests approach with flower offerings and small bowls of ghee. The dancer bows low, touching her forehead to the stone, not in submission, but in completion. The ritual is finished. The goddess has been honoured through her body, through movement, through longing offered without shame. You're invited to a small feast afterward. Bananas on leaf plates, warm sweet rice, spiced buttermilk, and the dancers sit with you, no longer goddesses, just girls again, laughing, stretching their legs. One of them asks where you're from. You answer, and she nods solemnly as if to say, "Ah yes, that explains it." But not unkindly, and then the question comes. "Did you see her?" she asks. You start to say yes, thinking she means the dancer, but no, she means her, the goddess. The one who arrived in the middle of the fifth song, when the fire in the dancer's eyes changed from human to holy. You pause, and then you say yes, because somehow you did. And while scholars continue to argue, was the Devadasi system exploitation master's sanctity or spiritual devotion corrupted by politics? You realise that the truth isn't tidy, it never is. Some dancers were revered, others were discarded, some were free, many were not. But in that sanctum, in that dance, in that body moving like fire wrapped in silk, you saw divinity, and it saw you back. You wake to the sound of water dripping gently into a pool and the distant trill of birdsong, light filtering through sheer fabric panels that sway in a salty breeze. You're no longer in a stone temple or a forest ashram. This place is marble and softness and warmth, Greece maybe, or Cyprus, but centuries back, when God still mingled freely with mortals and love didn't need to hide behind modesty. You're in the sanctuary of Aphrodite, and the sea, her true home, is only a short walk down a gently sloped path lined with olive trees and flowering myrtle. The air is thick with the scent of rosemary and rose petals crushed underfoot. You follow the path barefoot, the stone warm beneath your soles, until you reach the marble threshold of her bathhouse. This is no ordinary bath. This is a place of anointment, of initiation, a place where body and spirit are tended to equally, and where water is not just cleansing, but awakening. The bathhouse sits beneath a domed roof, its walls painted with scenes so vividly erotic and tender that you feel you've stumbled into someone's daydream. Lovers reclining in each other's arms, women bathing one another, men laughing in the shade of grapevines. Here, love is not linear. It's not male or female or one or the other. It just is. A priestess meets you, her robe barely clinging to her shoulder, her fingers scented with jasmine oil. She doesn't speak. She only smiles and gestures for you to disrobe, and somehow you don't feel embarrassed. Not here. Not in a place that's designed to honour what you are without judgment, without filters. You step into the warm pool carved from pink-veined marble. The water laps gently around your waist, and the moment it touches you, something inside softens. Not just your muscles, your mind too, like it's been holding its breath for years and finally exhales. And this is where the ritual begins. The priestess approaches, holding a shallow copper bowl filled with oil, floating with rose petals and slivers of citrus peel. She anoints your forehead, your chest, your inner wrists, each place warmed by your blood. She murmurs words you don't understand, but the tone is unmistakable. Reverence. Aphrodite was not just a goddess of sex, she was the goddess of beauty, of connection, of desire in its most raw and sacred form. Her worshippers didn't just offer coins or incense, they offered their own longing, their own vulnerability. To worship her was to surrender to the truth that love, especially physical love, was powerful enough to build empires and destroy them, sometimes in the same breath. Historical fact, the sanctuary of Aphrodite at Paphos in Cyprus was one of the most revered cult centres in the ancient Mediterranean. Pilgrims came from across the sea to participate in her rites, some of which, according to fragmentary records and poetic allusions, involved ritual bathing, erotic poetry and sacred unions meant to mimic the goddess's own liaisons with mortal lovers. Archaeologists have uncovered alabaster massage stones, erotic votive figurines, and even polished mirrors set into ceremonial altars. But what they haven't found is a definitive script, no manual. No instruction book for these rites. And maybe that's intentional. Maybe you're not meant to read about pleasure from a tablet, maybe you're meant to feel it. The priestess gestures for you to lie back, floating. She supports your head, cradling it like something precious. The water buoys you, weightless, ageless. You could be anyone, a sailor praying for safe voyage, a bride-to-be hoping for passion, a weary heart who's forgotten what it means to be touched without expectation. And then, without a word, She lifts a small clay jar and begins to pour its contents into the water. Honey, not too much, just a golden ribbon that disperses into silk. You feel it coat your skin, making the water feel even softer, like time itself has been melted down to its sweetest form. Here's a strange detail. In one preserved scroll from the Hellenistic period, there's mention of aphrodisiacae lutrae, baths of Aphrodite, in which bathers would soak in water laced with honey, goat's milk, and rare herbs. These weren't just luxurious, they were believed to prepare the body for union with the divine. Some priests even claimed the mix induced visions. Others simply said it made the soul taste sweeter. You float there, utterly still, as the temple fills with soft music, flutes, lyres, and the gentle rhythmic tapping of fingers on ceramic. The priestess begins to sing, and her voice is low, intimate. She sings not to you, but for you. A lullaby for the parts of yourself you forgot were sacred. You close your eyes. In the darkness behind your lids, the bath becomes a shoreline. You see Aphrodite rising from the foam, her hair slicked with sea salt, her gaze unblinking. She doesn't smile, she doesn't need to. Her entire presence is invitation. She steps toward you, lays her hand on your chest, not as a lover, not as a goddess, but as someone who sees all of you at once and doesn't flinch. When you open your eyes again, the priestess is gone. You're alone in the pool, surrounded by facade of flower petals, your skin gleaming like marble. You step out dripping, and someone wraps you in soft linen. You're given a small mirror, bronze, clouded with age. You look, expecting to see your face, but something's different. You look softer, not in a physical sense, but in the way you're being in your body, like you finally came home to it. And yet, even this peaceful rite has its controversy. Some scholars insist the erotic elements of Aphrodite's cult have been overstated, projected onto her by Roman writers with an agenda. Others argue that what we've lost in translation is the understanding that eroticism was once inseparable from holiness. To feel deeply, physically, was not to fall into sin, but to rise into communion. You leave the bathhouse at sunset. The sea glows. The sky blushes, as if embarrassed to be so beautiful. You smile without meaning to, and somewhere behind you the goddess smiles too. You wake up on the road again, though you can't remember falling asleep. Your skin still smells faintly of honey and myrtle, and your mind is caught between tides, one wave carrying you forward, another gently tugging back toward the touch of Aphrodite's priestess. But this place is different, cooler, earthier. A low mist clings to the land, and the air is thick with the scent of barley mash. Damp earth, and a hint of something metallic, like old bronze or blood. You're in Greece still, but deeper now, spiritually and literally. The Eleusinian Mysteries await. You don't walk into Eleusis. You arrive like everyone else, hooded, nameless, among thousands of other initiates who've been fasting, walking, and chanting for days. Your feet ache. Your stomach is hollow, and yet your body vibrates with a strange anticipation, like it knows what's coming even if you don't. No one speaks of what happens inside the sanctuary. That's the first rule. The second is to come willing to surrender what you think you are. You're brought to a massive hall, the Telesterion, a square chamber of stone with columns like ribs rising into shadow. Torches sputter along the walls. A soft, rhythmic chant hums through the space, too low to make out, like thunder held underwater. You aren't alone, but you feel utterly exposed, as though the temple sees more of you than your clothes cover. Then you're given the kikeion, a ritual drink made from barley water and mint. Simple. But you've heard the rumours. Some say it's just a fast breaker. Others insist it's laced with ergot, a natural psychedelic that grew on barley crops. Ancient LSD, in a sense. Whatever the truth, the moment you drink it, the world tilts, just slightly, like the air has become silk and your thoughts have turned into birds. This is where the forbidden pleasure begins, not with touch, not with sweat or oil, but with surrender. A different kind of ecstasy, the slow undressing of your rational mind. You sit among strangers who suddenly feel familiar, like reflections of forgotten versions of yourself, and then the ritual starts. Torches are extinguished, you're plunged into darkness. The myths say you'll witness the story of Demeter and Persephone, not as a tale, but as an experience. That you'll feel the grief of the mother searching, the terror of the daughter taken, the death, the silence, the return. But what no one told you, what no one can tell you, is how it feels when you hear Persephone scream for the first time. It's not theatrical, it's not symbolic, it's blood-curdling, and yet it stirs something in you, something that feels eerily close to desire. Not the polished kind you're used to, not candlelit or choreographed, but raw, desperate yearning, the kind that grabs the inside of your ribs and twists. The pleasure here isn't erotic in the usual sense, it's existential. It's the ache to be held, to be known, to be brought back from the dark. The lights return slowly, first a single flame, then another, then dozens, then hundreds, and suddenly there she is, Persephone, radiant and terrible, standing tall with pomegranate juice dripping down her chin like blood. She doesn't smile, she smoulders. Her return from the underworld isn't peaceful, it's furious, it's alive. In that moment the ritual shifts. A group of dancers enters the space dressed in red and white silks, their bodies moving in hypnotic circles around the central flame. They don't speak. They breathe together, and their breath becomes the beat. Faster, deeper. You can't look away. One dancer catches your gaze and holds it. Her hips sway, her feet never quite touching the ground, her mouth parted, not in invitation, but in offering. She embodies both Persephone and you, the part that was taken, the part that chose to return, and here's your historical anchor. While the exact rites of the Eleusinian Mysteries remain unknown, thanks to some impressively loyal initiates who never broke their silence, there are references in early plays and private writings to sensual or even erotic undercurrents in the rituals, especially during the Enactaron or Great Rite. Some scholars speculate that the symbolic marriage between Persephone and Hades may have been reenacted not just as myth, but as embodied ritual, blending forth to desire and transformation into one ecstatic act. You feel it now, not sex exactly, but something just as intimate, just as wild, like standing naked in front of your own soul and watching it blush. And now for the oddity. A Roman-era artifact discovered near Eleusis depicts a pair of intertwined snakes, one male, one female, with human faces. Some interpret it as symbolic of death and rebirth. Others insist it was a fertility charm. But a few fringe theorists believe it represents the sacred coupling said to take place between high initiates during the final rite, watched only by the torchlight and the statues of gods who never blink. You don't know what you believe, you only know how you feel. The dance reaches its peak. Music building, breath quickening, flame roaring, and then, with no warning, it all stops. Total silence, the kind that thuds in your ears like a heartbeat. A priest steps forward. His robe is black, his eyes lined with ash. He holds up a single stalk of grain. Life, he says, returns. No one claps, no one speaks, but tears fall, not from sadness, from the relief of coming back, of being brought through the underworld and reassembled, not exactly how you were, but close enough to keep going. As the initiates file out, blinking against the early morning sun, someone presses a pomegranate seed into your palm. You aren't supposed to keep anything, but no one stops you. Later you'll feel its weight in your pocket and wonder, how much of you stayed behind, and how much more has yet to awaken. You can't walk in a straight line after Eleusis, not physically, and not mentally. Your steps are slower now, not out of exhaustion, but as if your body is catching up to something your mind already left behind. You feel stretched across worlds, still holding the warmth of that torchlit chamber in your chest, like an ember smouldering where your breath used to live. You need space to breathe again, something wilder, less symbolic, more feral. And the gods, as always, seem to know. The path grows rockier. Trees twist. Grapevines creep across stone fences like lazy snakes. The terrain changes gradually, and then all at once you're in Thrace now, or maybe the forested slopes of Nysa. No maps here, just rhythm. Distant drums, the occasional crash of cymbals, and a feeling bubbling up inside you that something is about to be let loose. Welcome to a Dionysian rite. You arrive at the edge of a grove already alive with music. Torches flicker in tall stands. Wine flows from clay jugs into wooden bowls. The air smells of crushed thyme, wet earth, and the skin-warmed sweetness of fermenting grapes. Bodies move in the semi-dark, laughing, spinning, gasping with pleasure or awe or both. It's not madness exactly, it's permission. A woman greets you, her head crowned with ivy and her mouth purple from drinking. She hands you a cup without speaking. The wine is warm, thick, spiced with something more than just herbs. You drink it without hesitation. You're far past hesitation now. This is not a cult in the casual sense. It's not a circle of drunks and dancers pretending to know the god. This is real, sacred, and yes, utterly unhinged. The followers of Dionysus, the Maenads and satyrs and wild-eyed initiates didn't perform sanitized rituals. They surrendered. They broke down the walls between body and beast, ecstasy and agony, self and other. Tonight, you're one of them. You're led into the circle by dancers covered in paint and oil. They wear animal skins, gold leaf, nothing at all. They chant in a rhythm older than language, and your heart, traitorous thing that it is, starts to match them, beat for beat. You move, not because you're told to, but because your body insists. A hand finds yours. A stranger. No, many strangers. You are pulled into a spiral dance around the fire. The steps are clumsy at first, then they aren't. Then there are no steps at all, just movement, just the rush of heat in your veins, the breathlessness of spinning until your edges blur. You are drenched in sweat. Someone smears wine across your shoulders. Someone else throws flower petals into your hair. No one asks permission. And yet nothing feels violated. Every touch is worship, every laugh a hymn. Historically speaking, Dionysian rites were more than drunken orgies in the woods, though yes, there were definitely moments. They were deeply spiritual rituals of liberation. The Bacchae, his female followers, were believed to channel his divine madness, known as entheos, the root of our word enthusiasm, meaning the god within. And they didn't just party, they tore down illusions, sometimes quite literally. You recall a myth where a Maenad, in the grip of ecstasy, mistook her own son for a wild animal and tore him apart. It sounds gruesome, and yet symbolically, it's about dissolving identity, shattering the self, becoming raw, untamed. And here's your scholarly twist. Recent excavations near Mount Parnassus revealed a hidden grotto believed to be used for secret Dionysian rites. Among the artifacts were sculpted phalli, painted masks with expressions of rapture, and inscriptions that read, "I drank, I danced, I died, I was reborn." That's the rite in a nutshell. Back in the grove, someone places a panther skin across your shoulders, another places a grapevine wreath on your head. You're starting to understand this isn't about sex in the shallow sense, it's about wildness. Desire unchained from expectation. Pleasure not performed, but lived. A satyr figure, half naked, eyes wide, plays a flute so high and piercing, it cuts through your thoughts like glass. And suddenly everyone freezes. The fire crackles. The world holds its breath. Then from the trees, he arrives. Not in a blaze of glory, not with trumpets or thunder. He's young, beautiful, and terrifying. Dionysus. His skin glows faintly in the torchlight, as if he's made of honey and dusk. His eyes are soft but unreadable. He moves through the dancers without speaking, touching foreheads, lifting chins, running his fingers down spines. He touches you. Two, just once, at the base of your throat, and everything inside you goes quiet. You are seen, not admired, not desired. Seen. And it breaks something open. You begin to cry, not from sadness, from release, from the sudden, shocking realization that you've been holding yourself together for years, maybe lifetimes. And now, in this grove, under this sky, in this body, you don't have to. Here's your quirky fact. During Roman times, the Bacchanalia, the festivals of Dionysus, were banned by the Senate. Not because of moral outrage, though that was the excuse, but because they gave people, especially women and slaves, a taste of freedom that couldn't be controlled. A glimpse of something beyond hierarchy, beyond shame. That's what this is. Not just pleasure, but power. The music resumes, softer now. The dancing slows. You find yourself lying in the grass, the night sky spinning above you like a lazy wheel. Someone lies beside you. You don't know their name. You don't need to. Their hand finds yours, and the contact is enough. No words, just warmth, just breath, just being. As dawn begins to smudge the edges of the sky, the grove starts to empty. People leave in pairs, alone, or vanish into the trees. No one says goodbye. No one looks back. You sit up slowly, covered in dew and wine and earth. You are not the same, and you wouldn't go back if you could. The wildness doesn't wear off easily. It lingers in your bones like the buzz after too much wine, or a dream you can't quite shake. Even as you leave the forested hills behind and return to more structured paths, some part of you is still barefoot, still crowned in ivy, still humming the rhythm of last night's drumbeat under your breath. But now you're headed east along the Mediterranean, following the old Phoenician trade routes, until you find yourself on the ancient shores of Byblos, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. Here the sea is everything. It breathes life into the port. It scents the air with salt and memory. It's no surprise that the goddess who reigns here, Balat Gibbal, the Lady of Byblos, is also a mistress of the ocean's mysteries. You find her temple rising just above the coastline, surrounded by palms and worn sandstone walls that have seen more sunrises than entire nations. But there's something strange about this place. Unlike the stark grandeur of Greek sanctuaries or the rigid order of Egyptian temples, this one feels soft, lived in, almost cozy, if that's a word you're allowed to use for ancient places of worship. The courtyard is overgrown in places, moss curling around steps, jasmine vines reaching across crumbled stone. A few temple workers sweep the walkways, but none stop you. No one questions why you're here, as if the Lady of Byblos doesn't require invitation or explanation. She simply expects you. You're greeted by a woman with silver bracelets up both arms, and a scent like cedar and orange blossom trailing behind her. She tells you the rites of Baalat are beginning at sundown. They are different than what you're used to, she says with a grin. Not as theatrical, not as wild, but they last much longer. She isn't kidding. As twilight spills like ink over the sky, the temple fills with low music, flute strings, the occasional ring of cymbals, but the real ceremony begins with scent. Frankincense, myrrh, cedarwood, then rosewater, then something darker, labdanum, maybe, or a resin whose name no longer exists. Smoke curls in thick, slow columns, and the air becomes heavy with it. Breathing feels like drinking. You're led not into a chamber, but into a garden behind the temple, ringed by tall reeds and flickering oil lamps. A pool glimmers in the centre, and beside it soft cushions have been laid out under silk canopies that ripple in the warm breeze. Here the ritual is intimate, not in the physical sense, at least not yet, but in the energetic one. Participants lounge on cushions, sipping a dark, syrupy wine that numbs the tongue and warms the belly. No one speaks loudly. Everything is a murmur, a glance, a smile that stretches just a little too long. It's not an orgy, it's an atmosphere, a vibration you tune into without even noticing. And this is your historical footnote. Byblos, as a key city in the Phoenician world, blended Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and later Greek influences. The goddess Balat Gibbal was sometimes equated with Hathor, sometimes with Astarte, sometimes even with Aphrodite. Her rites are scarcely recorded, but references suggest they involved music, incense, and prolonged periods of sensory immersion, what some scholars interpret as slow intoxication rituals designed to gradually loosen the soul's grip on the body and make one receptive to divine whispers. You feel it happening. Your body softens. Your breath deepens. You feel less like a person and more like a field of heat, sensation, awareness. The priestess from earlier returns, but she's no longer wearing bracelets or smiles. She's barefoot now, wrapped in linen, stained with flower oils, and her face is streaked with gold dust. She moves like she's underwater, slow, graceful, deliberate. She lays a hand on your shoulder, and suddenly the space inside you feels infinite. This is not about climax, she says, as if reading your thoughts. This is about resonance. Let the goddess echo in you. Then she hands you a mirror, polished bronze, cool to the touch. But when you look into it, you don't see your face. You see a garden, not the one you're in, a deeper one, thicker vines, richer shadows, a fountain flowing not with water, but wine, and someone there, waiting, watching. Your eyes snap back to the moment. The mirror shows only your reflection now, pupils blown wide, mouth slightly open. You're still here, but not entirely. Nearby, two other participants, lovers or strangers who have chosen each other for the night, begin a ritual of touch, slow, reverent hands moving over cloth, not skin, foreheads pressed together. The entire temple watches without gawking. This is not performance. This is prayer. Here's your quirky tidbit. An obscure text found in a Phoenician tomb references the 5 delights, a series of ritual sensations said to be offered to the goddess by participants: warmth, scent, song, wine, and the ache of restraint. Scholars have long puzzled over that last one. Restraint as a delight. But sitting here, surrounded by so much beauty, held just at the edge of fulfillment, you understand. The build is the blessing. The priestess returns once more, this time with a thin vial of oil. She touches a drop to your sternum just above the heart. The scent is indescribable, like memory-made perfume. You close your eyes, and in that moment you see her. Not the priestess, her the lady Balat Gibbal. She rises from the pool, her skin glistening like moonlit stone, her hair black as the ocean depths. Her eyes are not warm, they are ancient, bottomless. She does not smile, she simply places her hand over your heart and says, in a voice like dripping honey, "You are seen." When you open your eyes again, the garden is emptying. The sky is deep blue now, stars flickering awake one by one. The priestess is gone, the oil still lingers on your chest, warm against your cooling skin. As you leave the garden, you walk more slowly than before, not from exhaustion, but because you know something has been planted in you, something that will take time to bloom. Pleasure doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and it waits. You leave Babylon just before dawn, the taste of rose-petal wine still clinging to the back of your throat, your skin perfumed with something you didn't apply. The lady of the temple may have released your body, but your soul, that's going to take longer. There's something about the way her hand pressed against your chest that keeps echoing, like a fingerprint in your breath. You walk for days without thinking, your mind softened, your limbs loosened, as if gravity is optional now, and when you finally feel the ground shift beneath your feet, you realise you're no longer walking on land. You're on an island. You don't remember the boat, or the crossing, or who brought you here. But the sand is warm and white, and the wind carries the scent of citrus and rain-soaked earth. Somewhere in the distance, a waterfall is laughing, and you know, without being told, that you've entered the realm of the Minoans. This isn't mainland Greece, this is Crete, but not the Crete of sun hats and sandals. This is the secret Crete, the one whispered about in forgotten scrolls and half-deciphered linear A tablets, the Crete of hidden rites, masked dancers, and temple corridors built like mazes, not to confuse intruders, but to awaken the lost. You're guided inland by a woman with bells on her ankles and a snake tattoo coiled around her wrist. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Her presence is language. She leads you through a dense grove of olive trees and into a narrow passage carved directly into the limestone cliffside. The air cools, the light fades. You descend, and then stop. You're blindfolded. You feel hands, gentle, practiced, looping soft fabric over your eyes, tying it behind your head with a knot that says, "This isn't coming off until we say so." You exhale. Trust is the only direction left to go. You're led by touch now through twisting halls that smell of salt and beeswax, and something faintly metallic. You hear chanting in the distance, soft and round, the vowels stretching like waves. You don't understand the language, but you understand the meaning. Something is beginning. The blindfold is removed. You stand in a chamber lit entirely by firelight. Its walls are painted with dancing figures, men, women, bodies that are both or neither, leaping bulls, spiraling serpents, breasts exposed, arms raised, always in motion. The chamber pulses with colour and heat. It's like standing inside a heartbeat. Before you is a stone platform covered in white linen. Around it, 7 masked figures stand in a circle. Each wears a different animal. A lion, a bird, a goat, a bee, a bull, a fish, and one you can't place. Their eyes are visible through the masks, and every one of them is locked on you. You've been chosen, not randomly, not as a guest, as an initiate. This is a rite of erotic rebirth, a forbidden ritual of the ancient Minoan cults, rarely discussed and never recorded in full. Scholars don't even agree if the Minoans had a pantheon, or simply worshipped divine forces of nature, earth, sky, sea, fertility, death. But they all agree on this. Something was happening in their temples that blended the sensual and the spiritual in ways the rest of the ancient world would later sanitize or suppress. The ritual begins. You're asked to undress, not by command, but by gesture. A masked figure holds out a bowl of oil. Another lifts a linen sheet. Modesty is melted in the heat of the fire. You lie on the platform, and the oil is poured across your chest, down your legs, into the hollows behind your knees. It is warm. It smells of saffron, bay leaf, and crushed myrtle. And then they begin to move. The masked figures dance around you, slow and sinuous, their bodies almost touching but never quite. One dips low, whispering something into your ear, something like a song or a spell. Another brushes fingers down your forearm, not to arouse but to awaken. Every gesture is choreographed, not for performance but for transmission. Here's your historical nugget. On a set of frescoes discovered in a Minoan temple complex near Katoxakros, there are depictions of ritual dancers circling a central figure who lies motionless. Their poses suggest eroticism, but not seduction. It's been interpreted as a ritual of transformation, possibly connected to the bull-leaping initiations or seasonal fertility rites. No one really knows. But when those paintings were first uncovered, the archaeologist wrote in his notes, "It is not orgy, it is alchemy." You're starting to understand what he meant. The dancers do not touch you to take, they touch you to stir, to call up the heat you've buried under politeness and performance. You feel it rise, not in a rush, but in waves. Soft, surging, almost painful in its gentleness. Your breath grows shallow. Not because you're afraid, but because your body is remembering something ancient, something it never forgot, just shelved. And here's the fringe fact, since we're being thorough. One rare linear A inscription carved into a bronze bowl and buried beside a woman's remains has been translated tentatively to read, "She opened herself to the snake, and the sky responded." Scholars argue whether this refers to an actual ritual act, a metaphor for fertility, or something far more esoteric. Tonight, you start leaning toward the esoteric. The dancers form a circle again, and the one in the snake mask approaches. They carry a shallow dish filled with honey and goat's milk. You're asked to drink. The taste is strange, sweet, earthy, faintly sour. It coats your mouth, your throat, your tongue. You feel the warmth bloom in your belly, and something in your mind loosens. You're not high exactly, but the walls breathe. The fire pulses. Your limbs become ideas instead of bones. And then they lift you. Your body is raised, not in sacrifice, but in celebration. The dancers chant your name, or perhaps the name you've only now remembered, belongs to you. They walk with you, cradled in their arms like a newborn. And you understand now, this is rebirth. Through trust, through pleasure, through surrender, the ritual ends not with a climax, but a stillness. You're laid gently back onto the platform. A veil is drawn across your body, and the dancers bow, not to you, to the process, to the goddess, to whatever has just passed through you. You leave the chamber alone. The air outside is cool, the stars above are impossibly bright. You breathe in, and the island breathes back. Somewhere far behind you, drums begin again. Another initiate has entered the maze. But you've already found your centre. It's strange, isn't it? How your body starts to learn without your mind. After Crete, something inside you begins to expect transformation, not as a surprise, but as the next logical step. You move through the world like someone who's been quietly initiated into a secret that language can't quite touch. Every breeze across your skin feels like a message. Every glance from a stranger feels like a test. And your dreams? They're not dreams anymore. They're instructions, gentle nudges from something very old, very patient, very sure you're finally ready. The land shifts again beneath your feet. You leave behind the salty blue of the Mediterranean and walk eastward into a realm of porcelain mountains, bamboo groves, and gardens so precisely balanced they look accidental. China, but not the version with dynasties and silk roots. This is older, deeper. You arrive in a secluded temple nestled among rolling hills, half hidden behind mists that never quite lift. It's not imposing. It doesn't need to be. The entrance is marked by a simple archway with two characters carved into it. Quiet joy. Inside the courtyard, the world feels muffled, as if wrapped in silk. A koi pond ripples softly under a weeping willow. Lanterns sway, casting gentle reflections onto the water. You've stepped into a Taoist sanctuary, a place where pleasure isn't performed or chased, but allowed to unfold slowly like a blossom responding to the morning sun. A man greets you, barefoot, his robes pale green, his expression somewhere between bemused and transcendent. He says nothing, only bows and motions for you to follow. You do. Through shaded walkways and incense-scented halls, past murals that pulse with soft eroticism, nude figures intertwine not in lust, but in harmony. These are not Keondo conquests. These are conversations. Every curve, every gaze, every touch is mutual. You are led to a chamber open on one side to a serene garden. Inside is a low bed of woven grass, cushions arranged in a circle, and shelves lined with scrolls, oils, and small jade sculptures shaped like abstract bodies. There's no urgency here, no script. The man, who now introduces himself simply as guide, asks if you've studied Taoist inner alchemy. You shake your head. He nods. Then we begin with breath. And so you do, breathing not just into your lungs, but into your lower belly, into your spine, into that small humming point between your hips that most people only think about in the dark. He speaks softly, explaining how the Taoist approach to pleasure is not about explosion, but circulation. Desire should rise like steam, not like fire. You're told to feel the energy spiral from your base, up through the organs, along your spine, into the crown of your head and back down in a loop. Over and over, like drawing figure eights inside your own body. It feels absurd, then it feels weird, then it feels incredible. This, he explains, is the practice of cultivating Jing, sexual essence, and transforming it into Qi, life energy. In Taoism, sexuality isn't sinful or shameful. It's medicinal, sacred, a tool for longevity, clarity, and even immortality if you know how to use it. Here's your historical anchor. Ancient Taoist texts like the Sunu Jing, classic of the Plain Girl, and Heki Jing, canon of harmonious energy, describe detailed practices for sexual cultivation where pleasure was mapped like a science. Breath, movement, pressures, points, timing, all synchronized not to achieve orgasm, but to transmute it into spiritual power. Lovers would train not to peak but to circulate, not to release but to retain. This was not repression, it was mastery. And yes, it included specific positions, each assigned different energetic outcomes. Some even involved aligning with phases of the moon, or coordinating with seasonal changes to amplify the effect. But what no one mentions in the texts is how tender it feels. The guide sits beside you and begins to demonstrate, not through touch, but through example. He breathes, he moves slowly, he smiles without tension. You mimic him, and slowly your breath becomes silk. Your awareness expands. You feel yourself melting, not downward, but inward. Then a woman enters. She's robed in midnight blue, her hair adorned with silver pins shaped like cranes. She introduces herself as Mirror. There's a glint in her eye that says she knows things about your body you haven't even learned yet. You're not afraid, you're curious, and she senses it. The guide bows and leaves. Mirror sits across from you and begins the Heki, the joining breath. You face one another, knees touching, hands resting on thighs, eyes open and soft. You begin to breathe together, slow and measured. You did inhale, exhale, and with each cycle your boundaries blur. You don't touch, you don't have to. The energy flows between you like invisible ink, heat coiling in the air. Then slowly, deliberately, she begins to guide your hands, first to your own body, to points behind your ears, at the base of your spine, along the line of your jaw. Awaken the gates, she says, and you do, one by one. She shows you how to stroke your forearms, not for arousal, but for stimulation of the channels. She guides you to press your tongue to the roof of your mouth, aligning the small heavenly circuit. You begin to sweat, not from exertion, but from heat building inside. And now your quirky fact. A fragment from a nearly lost Taoist text speaks of a rare practice called jade stalk dreaming, in which practitioners would enter a trance state through controlled breathing and visualized intimacy with celestial lovers, beings of both male and female aspects, who would teach through sensation, not language. Some believe these encounters happened only during specific lunar phases. Others claim they could be summoned on demand if the practitioner had purified their inner jade chamber. You don't see celestial lovers, but you do feel something strange. As Mirror moves closer, her palm hovering over your chest, you feel a spiral open behind your sternum. A warmth flows up from your lower belly, like golden smoke. Your body doesn't crave, it receives. Every breath becomes a kiss, every silence, a sigh. She never touches you, and yet your skin burns with presence. The rite ends not with a release, but a settling, like rain after a long drought. You lie on your side, curled loosely, your limbs humming. Mirror brushes a fingertip across your brow and whispers, "The real pleasure is in the stillness after." You believe her. Outside, the sky is beginning to change colour. Mist curls around the temple rooftops like a living thing. You sit up slowly, gather your breath, and bow. You are given a jade pendant, small, smooth, carved with a swirl. To remind you, Mirror says, that the spiral is always turning. You wear it around your neck as you step back into the world. Not full, but flowing. The spiral turns and you follow it. Jade pendant warm against your chest. Breath slower now, not because you're tired, but because you've finally remembered that rushing is optional. The road winds northward, and the air grows cooler, pine-scented, with a damp sweetness that clings to your clothes like fog. You're walking along a forest path now, narrow and uneven, the canopy so dense it muffles even your footsteps. Somewhere in the distance a wind chime rings, not a modern one, but something older, carved from bone or wood, tuned to frequencies no longer in fashion. You're in Japan, or rather you're in the borderland between this world and the kami, the spirits that dwell in trees, rocks, rivers and breath. This isn't a grand Buddhist temple or a bustling shrine lined with red torii gates. It's smaller, stranger, sacred in a way that doesn't need size. You come upon it slowly, a clearing of moss-covered stones, a wooden shrine barely taller than you, nestled beneath a leaning cypress. There's no priest, no schedule, just a feeling, like the forest is holding its breath. You step into the clearing and immediately you feel watched. Not by a predator, not by anything hostile, just aware. The air tingles with presence. You see strips of white paper tied to the branches, fluttering with written wishes and whispered apologies. A small bowl sits on the shrine's ledge, filled with rice, plums and, curiously, a folded paper crane. You kneel, not because someone tells you to, but because not kneeling here feels like interrupting someone else's conversation. Then she arrives. You don't hear her footsteps, she's just suddenly there. Young, barefoot, robes simple, her hair loosely tied with a ribbon the colour of snowmelt. She carries a bundle of foxglove in one hand and a lacquered box in the other. She doesn't speak, only nods once, as if to say, "You came, that's enough. This is a Shinto priestess." But not the kind you've seen in photos at crowded city shrines. She belongs to an older practice, one that isn't advertised, one that doesn't always ask permission from the government to continue existing. She beckons you to sit beside the shrine. You do. She opens the door. Inside are small wooden figures, each carved into the shape of intertwined animals, foxes, rabbits, cranes. None are crude, but none are polished either. They feel personal. One is cracked. Another has a tiny red ribbon tied around its neck. The priestess selects a pair and places them gently in your hands. You feel the smooth wood warm against your palms. She tells you softly now that tonight's ritual is not a performance or a prayer. It's an offering, but not from you to the spirits. It's the other way around. The foxes bring you a gift, she says, but you must be willing to receive it with your whole body. That's when you notice the arrangement around you. A ring of stones embedded with faded kanji, forming a boundary not meant to keep you in, but to keep something else focused. A fire is lit in the centre, small and smokeless. She feeds it dried plum branches and something wrapped in silk. The smoke smells faintly of sake and soil, and then she begins to chant, not in Japanese, but in something far older. It sounds like wind negotiating with water. The foxes are coming. You don't see them with your eyes, but with your body. A rustle here, a shift in air pressure there. Your skin prickles, your jaw relaxes. You feel laughter just behind your ribs, and then a pressure, low in your belly. Not threatening, but undeniably sensual. The priestess's chant becomes breathier, slower, as if sinking to something moving between your legs and your lungs. You're not being seduced. You're being tuned. Here's your historical grounding. In older Shinto traditions, foxes, kitsune, were not only messengers of Inari, the rice god, but also associated with shapeshifting and erotic magic. Some legends describe them taking human form, often as beautiful women or androgynous figures, to engage in liaisons with mortals. These weren't mere trickster tales, they were initiations. To sleep with a fox spirit was to blur the line between this world and the next, between pleasure and prophecy. Your priestess finishes the chant and removes a small jar from her sleeve. She uncorks it, releasing a scent that makes your whole body lean forward involuntarily. Musk, sandalwood, and something electric, like ozone before a thunderstorm. She anoints your wrists, your neck, the centre of your chest. Her hands never linger, yet you feel marked, tagged even. Then she steps back and vanishes into the mist. You're alone, but you are not alone. In the stillness that follows, something touches your mind, light as a feather, insistent as breath. Not a voice, a suggestion. You lie back onto the moss. The ground is soft, warm beneath the surface, almost pulsing. Your hands rest beside you, open. And then, sensation. Fur brushing your thigh, a breath against your collarbone. Fingertips, or are they claws, trailing your jawline. You can't see anything, but your body reacts with that primal, knowing shiver. You're being worshipped. Not as a god, but as a vessel. The pleasure isn't overwhelming. It's patient. A gentle heat that rises not like fire, but like a tide. It carries you up and up, until you're not sure where you end and whatever's touching you begins. Here's your quirky fact. Some Edo period erotic art depicted kitsune lovers in the act of dream travelling, entering their human partner's dreams to stimulate the body from within. It was believed that repeated unions with a fox spirit could lengthen life, enhance intuition, and even grant the gift of poetic madness. Of course, others warned it could drive you insane. You don't feel mad, you feel invited. The spirit doesn't enter you in the way you've been taught to imagine. It enfolds you. It seeps into your pores like perfume. It curls inside your muscles like sleep. And when the moment of release comes, because of course it does, it's not a climax but an arrival. Like you've walked through a door in your own body and found a room you never knew existed. You lie there for a long time. The air slowly clears. You feel cleaner, emptier, fuller. Eventually the priestess returns. Her hair is damp now, and she carries 2 cups of warm plum wine. You drink in silence, the liquid sharp and sweet. She smiles at you, not with pride but with understanding. The foxes only visit those who already know, she says, even if they've forgotten. You bow. She bows. The fire is out. And somewhere in the trees, something with golden eyes watches you go. By the time you step out of the forest, you're not sure whether it's dawn or dusk. The sky is colourless in that liminal way, like it's between decisions. Your senses are soft edge but wide open. Every sound, every scent, every brush of wind feels like a whisper in a language you almost remember. You keep thinking you'll return to something familiar now, some city, a palace, a shrine with pamphlets in 12 languages. But no, instead you arrive at a door that wasn't there until it needed to be. It's carved from cedar, unpainted, unpolished. No lock, no handle, just a curtain of silken threads hanging over the entrance, each one strung with tiny bells shaped like teardrops. As you brush through them, they tinkle, soft and chaotic like the sound of laughter in a dream. You're in Kyoto now, or near it. But the place you're entering isn't found on maps. It's not a tourist destination. It doesn't have a sign outside with a name in cursive font and a lantern offering warm welcomes. It is, in every way, a place that exists only when someone is ready for it. You've come to meet a sacred courtesan, not a geisha, not an oiran. She is neither and both. She is part of an older lineage, one nearly erased, almost forgotten, whispered about in back rooms and preserved only in fragments of poetry and shadow plays. Her name changes with each generation, but here, in this place, she is simply called the One Who Listens. The room she receives you in is dim but not dark. The walls are paper screens painted with cranes and waves, and a single candle flickers on a low lacquered table. The scent is sandalwood, yes, but also something else. Skin-warmed silk, maybe, or plum wine that's been steeped with memories. She kneels beside the table, pouring tea into 2 ceramic cups. Her face is veiled, not with cloth, but with presence. She doesn't speak. She waits. And something in her silence makes you confess more than words. You sit. She slides 1 cup toward you and watches as you take it. The tea is warm, earthy, infused with some kind of flower you can't name. As you sip, her fingers rest lightly on the floor. She hums, just once. A sound so low and deliberate it seems to tug at a string behind your ribs. And then she begins the ritual. No chant, no incense, no bells, only movement. She rises. Her robes rustle like falling leaves. With each step her body speaks, not in the language of seduction, but of invitation. She does not dance for you. She dances with the air around you. And in that moment, you're not watching her, you're feeling yourself through her. And this is where the pleasure begins, not with touch, but with being seen by someone who doesn't need to ask questions. Her gaze dissects and repairs at once. She moves around you in a slow, spiralling circle. The folds of her robe brush your shoulder. Her shadow stretches across your lap. She reaches out, not to caress, but to place her palm flat against the center of your back. Your spine straightens instinctively. You feel like a bell being tuned. Historically, sacred courtesans in Japan existed outside the rigid roles of wife, mother, or priestess. They were trained in music, poetry, calligraphy, but also in the subtle arts of presence, pleasure, and psychic listening. Some operated out of hidden temples, others in floating world enclaves where the line between performance and prayer blurred. And while many were eventually absorbed into more commercial roles, or erased entirely by modernization, there are still rumours of lineages that continued in secret, passing their teachings hand to hand, body to body. Your hostess begins to undress, not quickly, not coyly. Piece by piece she removes layers of fabric, each one folded and placed beside her with reverence. Not a striptease, a shedding. You watch her become more herself with every layer that falls away. When she's bare, she kneels before you and offers her hand, not demanding touch, but requesting presence. You accept. Her body is warm and soft, yes, but it's the energy between you that crackles. She guides your hands across her skin, showing you how to feel without grasping, how to listen through fingertips. Every inch of her is a map, but you are not here to conquer, you are here to wander. And here's your fringe detail. In certain scrolls from the Edo period, there are coded references to the invisible room, a term thought to refer to a technique where pleasure is evoked not through intercourse, but through a trance state induced by breath, scent, and synchronized touch. The goal was to create an erotic experience entirely within the nervous system, something the courtesan could control with minimal movement. A full-body hallucination of closeness. That's what this is. She places her forehead against yours and breathes. Once, twice, and then something changes. You feel a vibration under your skin. Your body doesn't crave, it sings. You're not aroused in the usual way, you're elevated. Every part of you is being played like a silent instrument. Her breath guides the rhythm, her body guides the melody. You just listen. The climax, if you can call it that, comes quietly. No cries, no desperate movement, just a single shuddering exhale from both of you at once, and a silence that blooms like smoke. She pulls back, opens her eyes and bows. You bow too. And then she wraps you in a thin silk robe and leads you to a futon laid out beside the paper screen. You lie down. She brushes your hair back once, lights a fresh candle, then leaves. Not forever, just long enough for you to feel yourself in your own body again. Here's your historical fact. The word awabi, meaning abalone gutobini, was used in old Japanese pillow books as a euphemism for female sensuality. Not just anatomy, but the entire act of shared pleasure. But in the oldest usage it meant the open shell, a metaphor for receptivity, for sound, for the echo. That's the role the sacred courtesan played. She was the shell, you were the echo. You wake hours later, or maybe just minutes, to find your tea warm again, your robe folded neatly beside you, and a small origami crane resting on your chest. It carries no message. It doesn't need to. You've already heard everything you needed to hear. You leave the hidden room behind with the softness of silk still ghosting your skin, and the image of the sacred courtesan folded quietly into your breath. Something in you has shifted, not dramatically, not with fanfare, but like a tide turning beneath the surface. You don't walk faster now, you walk deeper. Every footstep feels like it sinks a little more into the present moment, like the earth beneath you has finally started listening. And then, all at once, the mood changes. The air sharpens, the sky hardens. The sounds around you lose their elegance and become guttural, louder, faster. You're not in gardens or temples now. You're not even in the same hemisphere. You're in the highlands of ancient Mexico. Tenochtitlan. The city rises before you like a dream made of obsidian and heat. sun-bleached stone and red-painted staircases leading toward the sky. There is rhythm here, always rhythm. The beat of drums, the clack of sandals on causeways, the bark of traders, the hiss of food roasting in open-air fires. You feel it in your sternum. This place moves like blood. You're led through narrow alleyways and open-air plazas, up stone steps that seem to vibrate with old energy, until you arrive at the foot of a temple. Not the great Temple Maya, but a smaller one, quieter. The temple of Xochiquetzal, goddess of beauty, of love, of feminine pleasure, and oddly enough, of childbirth. She is not Aphrodite, she is not Hathor, she is more dangerous than either. She is silk threaded with obsidian, flowers blooming beside flint knives. The priest who greets you is young, beautiful, shirtless. His chest is painted with red swirls, his eyes lined with something dark and mineral. He carries a bundle of feathers and speaks your name without asking. The rite, he says, to what we're not for the faint of body. You are led into the temple's inner chamber, circular, domed, and lit only by shafts of sunlight filtering through tiny holes in the ceiling. The walls are painted with vines, birds, jaguars, and women dancing in ecstatic surrender. But there are other images too. Women giving birth, men with arms raised in praise, their skin flayed and reborn in red paint. Pleasure and pain here do not cancel each other out. They complete one another. The ritual begins with flowers, marigolds, plumeria, bougainvillea. The priest crushes them into a paste and rubs it onto your arms, your chest, and your inner thighs. The smell is intoxicating, sweet but earthy, like a rotten bloom woven into one. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat, and another priestess, this one older, draped in crimson robes, offers you a drink. It's thick, bitter, made from cacao and ground peppers and something else. You taste smoke, you taste iron, and then you feel it. Not a high, not exactly, more like a gathering. Your senses tighten into perfect focus. The colours around you bloom wider. The beat of the temple drum grows louder, more urgent. Your own breath feels like it's echoing off the walls. The priestess takes your hand and places it on your chest. You must open, she says, to the goddess, to yourself, to the cut and the caress. Here's your historical grounding. Xochiquetzal's temple rites are not well documented in direct detail. Most of what we know comes through Spanish accounts, often filtered through horror or misunderstanding. But among the Nawa people, it's known she presided over artists, weavers, lovers, and women in labour. Her priests and priestesses performed ceremonies that celebrated sensuality not as a sin, but as a sacred force. Offerings to her were often paired with erotic poetry and music, and in rare festivals, certain initiates were said to undergo physical rites, acts of intense sensation that hovered between pleasure and pain, meant to honour the full spectrum of the body's power. You are now one of those initiates. A blindfold is tied around your eyes. The darkness doesn't frighten you. It frees you. Hands begin to move across your skin, carefully, confidently. Some warm, some cool, some featherlight, others pressing with measured firmness. You don't know how many. You stop trying to count. The touches become rhythm. You're no longer observing the ritual. You're inside it. You're kissed, but not on the mouth, on the back of the neck. The inside of your elbow, the hollow beneath your ribs, a language of lips that speaks only in metaphors. And then comes the scratch, just along your shoulder blade, a shallow cut barely more than a sting. A breath follows it, a kiss to soothe. The sharpness is not violence, it's awakening. In Aztec cosmology, the body was not separate from the divine, and blood, when offered willingly, was not loss but transformation. You're offering yourself not in death, but in sensation. A drumbeat rises, fast, intimate, like a heartbeat pressed against your ear. You feel yourself lifting, not levitating, but expanding. Your skin seems wider, your pulse louder. Every nerve is an instrument, and the room plays you with expert hands. You're not being brought to climax, you're becoming climax. And here's your quirky fact. There exists a small figurine discovered near Xochiquetzal's temple ruins of a woman reclining in bliss, a jaguar licking her foot. Scholars have debated its meaning, fertility charm, sensual myth, or a symbol of balance between power and pleasure. A fringe theory? That certain priestesses kept jaguars as living symbols of the goddess's dual nature, beauty and brutality. There are whispered tales of rites where initiates would face the animals, not in battle, but in surrender. You understand that now. When the blindfold is removed, the room is bright with flowers and shorn. The priestess lays your hand across your own chest. "You are not a wound," she says. "You're a door." You're bathed gently with warm water and rose oil. Your clothes are returned, but you feel them differently now, like decorations on a body that no longer hides. As you step out of the temple, the sun sears your eyes. Below, the city teems with life. Markets, dancers, offerings being made to 100 gods. But you've already met the only one you needed. She was inside you all along. By now, you've stopped looking for signs. The path doesn't announce itself anymore. It simply unfolds, step by step, like a tongue licking slowly along the edge of a secret. You don't ask where you're going. You trust that when you arrive, your body will know before your brain does. And that's exactly what happens as the noise of empire starts to rise all around you. Stone roads underfoot, the scent of baked bread and olive oil in the air, and the unmistakable clamour of a city built on control. You're in Rome. But not that Rome. Not the marble-faced tourist trap of senators and gladiators. You're below it, deep beneath the orderly grid of empire, where torches flicker against damp stone and rituals still bloom in the cracks. You've entered the world of the mystery cults, those secretive, sensual societies that promise salvation through revelation, initiation through intimacy. Their rites were whispered about, feared, and outlawed more than once, which of course only made them more desirable. The chamber you're led to is carved out of solid rock, rounded, windowless, lit by shallow clay lamps burning oil that smells faintly of pine and sweat. Symbols are painted on the walls in red and gold, stars, eyes, serpents coiling around staffs. You recognize some, others resist translation. One in particular draws you in, a pair of figures, naked, bound together not in chains but in ribbons, their mouths pressed close but not touching. You're handed a cup of dark wine. The man who gives it to you is masked, silver and expressionless. He gestures for you to sit. The others do the same. 10 of you, maybe more. No names are exchanged. Everyone here is a question. And tonight, the ritual intends to answer each of you through your body. This is the cult of the Magna Mater, Cybele, the Great Mother, whose worship came to Rome from Asia Minor, wrapped in controversy and allure. Her rites were ecstatic, unrestrained, and yes, forbidden. Her initiates drummed until their hands bled, danced until they collapsed, and sometimes, so the stories go, offered pieces of themselves in sacrifice. But not all of the rites were so violent. Some were slow, sensual, introspective. Yours will be one of those. The woman who enters as next wears a mask of gold. Her robe is sheer, her hair loose. She does not speak. She only kneels in the centre of the circle and opens a small box. Inside, rose petals, salt, a polished mirror, and a thin blade. You're not asked to choose. You're asked to watch. The woman anoints herself with the rose petals, rubbing them across her arms, her chest, her thighs. She sprinkles salt along her collarbones and leans back so her skin catches the light, glittering like she's sweating stars. Then she picks up the mirror, not to look into it, but to hold it out toward the group. It reflects not just your face, but the flickering shadows behind it. "You are the mask," a voice says behind you. You don't turn and you don't need to. The face comes later. The blade is last. She doesn't cut. She presses just enough to remind herself that she is real, that her skin has edges, that her body isn't a metaphor. It's the altar. And then she chooses someone. It's you. She beckons you into the centre, and the group parts like a sea of breath and expectation. You kneel. The golden mask tilts slightly. Her fingers brush the side of your face, and you feel a shiver that starts in your scalp and runs down your spine like melted wax. She whispers something in a language you don't recognize, but your body does. You're asked to lie down. You do. She binds your wrists, not tightly but firmly, with red silk cords. You could escape easily, but you don't want to. Not from this, not now. She begins to move over you, not straddling, not grinding, just hovering, her breath hot across your lips, her fingertips trailing fire along your ribs. She never kisses you, but somehow you feel kissed, all over. And here's your historical anchor. The mystery cults of Rome often used theatrical ritual as a pathway to transcendence. In the cult of Cybele, some rites included masked sexual roleplay, symbolic bondage, and controlled pain. not as punishment, but as a means to dissolve ego. To let go of identity. Pleasure wasn't the goal, disappearance was. You are disappearing now, not dying, not dissolving, just slipping out of the tight clothes of language and story. Beneath the golden mask, the priestess becomes everyone you've ever loved, and everyone who's ever loved you. Her touch is ritual, her seance is scripture. She unties your wrists, not as a gift, as a responsibility. You rise slowly, body aching with sensation, breath caught somewhere between a moan and a prayer. The others around you nod, not in approval but in recognition. You've joined them now, you wear no mark. But they'll know. Here's your fringe fact. One forbidden scroll, recovered in the ruins of a collapsed Mithraic temple, tells of an underground rite called Liberatio via Corpus, freedom through the body. It describes a sequence of touch exposure and restraint meant to create total ego death. The ritual was banned, then revived, then lost again, but those who experienced it claim they no longer feared judgment, or God, or death. As you leave the chamber, a woman presses something into your hand, a small token, shaped like the same entwined figures from the wall. You close your fist around it and feel the warmth of every touch, every breath, every shiver from the rite still living in your skin. Outside, the Roman streets roar back to life. Horses, beggars, senators, lovers, all oblivious to what's just been reborn below them. You walk among them without speaking. Your name hasn't changed, but you have. The city fades behind you like a fever dream. Stone streets melting into countryside, noise peeling away layer by layer, till only the pulse in your ears remains. The token from the underground rite still rests in your pocket, warm like it's remembering you as much as you're remembering it. But you've learned by now that the rites never leave you empty-handed. They send you onward, changed, yes, but also marked, magnetized, as if some unseen current has taken hold of your spine and begun reeling you in. This time it draws you south, across sands, through date groves, along the winding Nile, where its waters darken like ink spilled on silk. The air thickens with sweetness, lotus and blue water lily, old perfume and something more primal, until the temple rises ahead of you in carved sandstone glory, lit by starlight and torch. You've arrived at Dendera, not the bustling temple it once was in daylight, filled with scribes and festival-goers. This is Dendera at night, quiet, towering, hidden behind veils of silence and shadow. The temple of Hathor, goddess of love, joy, music, and the sky. But this time you're not here for music. You're not here to watch dancers or feast on figs in her honour. Tonight, you've come for something deeper, something whispered. Something not even all her priests knew existed. The priestess who greets you wears robes the colour of midnight and gold. Her hair smells of almond oil, and her eyes are ringed with kohl so thick it seems to trap stars. She doesn't introduce herself, she only touches her finger to your lips and says, "Follow." You pass through massive pillars carved with the face of Hathor, smiling, serene, unblinking. And yet you feel them watching, not in judgment, in invitation. She leads you to a hidden chamber deep within the temple, beneath the floors, past corridors not shown on any map. It smells of crushed rose petals and old incense, damp limestone and something faintly metallic, like the inside of your mouth after a long, deep kiss. The room is round. There are no statues, no candles, only mirrors. Polished copper discs hanging on the walls and lying scattered across the floor. In their reflections, everything flickers, your breath, your silhouette, your fears. You are asked to disrobe. There's no shame in it, only clarity. The cloth falls away and your body becomes light and shadow. The priestess takes a jar from a small alcove and begins to anoint you. Slowly, reverently. The oil is warm, and it smells like honeyed wine and something darker, an aphrodisiac pressed into your skin like an unspoken promise. "This is the house of stars," she says, "and tonight you will offer yourself to the sky." And this is where the pleasure begins, not in the obvious way, but through stillness, through reflection, through the unbearable intimacy of seeing yourself completely, naked, glistening, unguarded, reflected in a dozen shimmering surfaces. You are told to sit on the stone platform at the centre of the chamber. The floor beneath you vibrates faintly, subtle, like breath. The walls begin to hum, soft at first, then growing, as though the very air is singing. You realise it's not Mishas music, it's chanting. The voices rise from somewhere above, drifting down through shafts in the ceiling, reverberating off the mirrors. A song of Hathor, sung by unseen priestesses, their harmonies weaving into a net that catches your thoughts and stills them. And here's your historical grounding. Dendera's temple was one of the few in ancient Egypt where women held prominent roles, not just as dancers and musicians, but as high priestesses. Some rituals held in her honour, particularly during the festival of the Beautiful Reunion, involved midnight processions, scented oils, and what scholars have gently called mystery rites of fertility. But within the deeper sanctums, beyond public ceremonies, there were whispers of even more intimate practices, ones that honoured the erotic body as a celestial instrument, not just a vessel. Your priestess kneels beside you now. Her hands are cool where the oil has dried. She holds a mirror up to your face and asks, "What do you see?" You hesitate, and then answer honestly, "I see someone who wants to be known." She nods, then she guides your hands to your own body, not to explore but to connect. Your palms press against your chest, your hips, the backs of your knees. She whispers instructions, not how to touch, but how to feel, not how to chase pleasure, but how to become porous to it. "Let the stars enter you," she says. "You're not just a seeker, you're a sky." The chanting above changes now, deeper, more resonant, and something inside you blooms. You feel it unfold, petal by petal, in your belly, your throat, the space between your ribs. Your skin tingles, your breath staggers. You're not climaxing, you're ascending. Here's your quirky fact. A recently translated text from the temple walls refers to the mirror rite of the cow, in which initiates were said to take on the aspect of Hathor herself, who was often depicted as a cow for her fertility and nurturing powers, through erotic ritual. The initiate, after anointment and reflection, would claim their own divinity through sensation, not in domination, but in surrender. You surrender now, not to her, not even to Hathor, to yourself. You lie back on the platform. The priestess covers your eyes with her hand and whispers, "Now remember who you were before the world touched you." And suddenly, you do. You remember the soft heat of your first desirs, the thrill of being seen, the pain of hiding, the ache of wanting without knowing what for, and the joy of knowing, now, the rite ends in shandos. The chanting stops, the mirrors dim. You are dressed again, but the cloth no longer separates you from yourself, you wear it like smoke. As you rise, the priestess offers you a small object, a shard of polished copper wrapped in linen. "Carry your reflection with you," she says, "but don't chase it." You leave the chamber barefoot. The air outside is cooler now, scented with lotus and ash. You pass once more through the great hall of columns, and Hathor's many faces smile down at you. Not smugly, but knowingly. You step into the night. Above, the stars blink slowly into being, and for the first time in your life you feel like they're watching you. The night air tastes different now, like it's been distilled through song and skin and starlight. Your breath feels longer, your steps slower, but not from weariness, from gravity. A gravity that isn't pulling you down but in. You're not wandering anymore, you're orbiting, and something ancient is sitting at the centre, waiting. You follow the desert eastward, over sandstone ridges and through carved rock valleys where the wind moves like a whisper, passed from one god's ear to another. You don't notice when you cross the border, or even what that border was, but eventually the air thickens, the earth darkens, and the language around you begins to carry a different rhythm, soft, but edged in steel. You've come to the land of Sheba. Yes, that's Sheba, the queen wrapped in myth and perfume, the sovereign whose arrival once made a king write poetry he didn't understand. But you're not here for her legend, you're here for the place she left behind, her cave. The entrance lies tucked behind a rock outcrop, half hidden by the thorny trees and faded prayer cloths tied like whispers to the branches. The doorway is carved into the stone itself, unmarked, but unmistakable. It does not announce itself, it waits. Inside, the air is dry, cool, and scented with myrrh. You descend by torchlight, guided by a priest whose face is half shrouded and voice is nearly silent. "This is the mother's chamber," he says, and something in the way he says mother makes you straighten your spine, not from fear, from instinct. The chamber opens into a vast underground vault, half temple, half womb. The walls are curved, smooth, ribbed like the inside of a seashell. There are no statues, no scripts, only symbols carved in looping circular patterns that suggest meanings no alphabet could carry. In the centre lies a low altar covered in furs, pomegranate skins, and what looks like red ochre paint, or blood, or both. You're told to remove your shoes, not because it's sacred, because the earth wants to feel you. A woman enters, not veiled, not adorned, tall, dark, eyes lined with crushed charcoal, and bare from the waist up. Her body is inked with swirling tattoos, ancient designs coiling around her hips, her ribs, her throat. She looks like a map that leads somewhere inside you. Somewhere you've spent a lifetime pretending didn't exist. "I am the echo of the queen," she says. You don't question it. You kneel. She walks around you once, slowly, deliberately. Then she leans in close and says, "Your body has something to say. Tonight, we listen." This is not a goddess worship ritual. It is not a fertility rite or an offering for rain. This is a ritual of remembering, of pulling something buried in the body, desire, grief, memory, back into the mouth. You are laid on the furs, arms spread, heart open, eyes closed. The priestess takes a bowl of thick red paste and begins to paint your chest or your thighs, your stomach, your temples. The paste is warm, gritty. You feel it soak into your pores, your pulse. She hums as she works, not a song but a vibration, like something blooming in her throat just for you. And this is where the pleasure begins, not from touch, not from sex, but from being touched with intention. The difference is startling. Every stroke of her fingers awakens something underneath your skin, not lust but truth. You feel yourself melt, not like wax, but like resistance. She presses her palm to your sternum. "What are you hiding here?" she asks. You don't answer with words, your body does. It arches, not in pain, not in climax, in confession. Here's your historical anchor. The Queen of Sheba has long been associated with erotic knowledge, spiritual power and political cunning. Ancient Ethiopian texts speak of her as Makeda, a sovereign in her own right, whose temple rituals were rooted in dreamwork, touch, and bodily revelation. Some legends say her lineage preserved rites passed down from even older, pre-dynastic traditions, rites in which the high priestess did not merely lead prayer, but entered the seeker through guided pleasure, vision, and sacred embodiment. Not to dominate, to liberate. Your priestess is doing exactly that. She begins to chant now, a low, melodic cycle that moves through your bones like heat. With every syllable, she draws circles across your abdomen, your hips, your thighs. Then she places her mouth near your ear and says, "Speak your oldest desire." You do, and it shames you. And she smiles. "There is nothing wrong with hunger," she whispers, "only with pretending it doesn't exist." She guides your hand to her waist, not to take, but to mirror. She shows you how to move with her, how to follow the rhythm of her breath, how to listen through your fingertips. This is not intercourse, this is intercourse. A flowing between two bodies like water through cupped hands. And here's your fringe fact. One nearly lost ritual described in a Ge'ez fragment refers to a rite called Mahda's Haimeno, the bed of the revelation, in which the initiate would lie beneath a priestess who would channel ancestral voices during erotic union. The goal was not orgasm, it was divination, to bring back truths from the body's deepest caves, to return with names unspoken for generations. You return now, not with visions, but with knowing. The priestess lowers her body over yours, not to pin, but to shield. Her breath flows across your face. She hums again, and you feel yourself break, not into pieces, but into presence. You are here now, fully. There is no part of you turned away. When it ends, you lie together in silence. Her fingers draw slow shapes across your stomach. "You carried too much," she says. "Now you can carry yourself." She places a piece of obsidian in your hand, sharp, smooth, shaped like a tooth. "For cutting away shame," she says. "Use it often." You rise. Outside the cave, the desert winds howl, softly, like distant applause. The stars above look closer than they should be. You walk barefoot for a while, just to feel the world knowing you've come back to it. You don't return the same way you came, you never do that. Once you've descended into the mouth of a forgotten queen and felt your own desire mirrored back to you without fear or shame, the path forward reshapes itself. There are no wrong turns now, only necessary ones. You follow instinct, not maps. The wind tugs you westward, and you let it. Your feet find the road back to Italy, but the marble is softer now, the ruins less hollow. You walk into Pompeii not as a tourist, not as a pilgrim, but as a kind of revenant, returning to a place frozen not in death, but in memory. The air is still. The city is half asleep, as if it hasn't decided whether it's ready to be remembered. Ash hangs in the silence, even now, centuries later. But beneath the broken archways and collapsed walls, there's something alive, tucked behind frescoes, buried under volcanic dust, whispered through scorched stone. Pompeii, for all its tragedy, did not die in agony. It died mid-ecstasy, mid-touch, mid-laughter. You step into what was once a home, though it feels more like a temple now. The domus of someone wealthy, important. The frescoes still cling to the walls, soft pinks and dusky reds, peeling at the edges, but clear enough to recognise the scenes. Lovers embracing, satyrs chasing nymphs. A woman reclining on a couch, fingers dipped in a bowl of figs, her gaze as hungry as it is bored. This was not decoration, it was documentation. You wander deeper into the villa, through sunlit atriums and shaded corridors, until you come upon a smaller chamber. The doorway is low, the air is cooler, the floor is still mosaic, tiny tiles arranged in spirals and petals, but faded. This is a private room, not for guests, not for show. A woman stands inside. You're not surprised. You've stopped being surprised by now. She wears a stola of saffron, her hair coiled in the old Roman style, but her presence isn't theatrical. It's weighty, lived in. She doesn't introduce herself. Just gestures for you to sit on the low couch. You do. This is the wall, she says. We don't speak here, we remember. She gestures to the mural behind her, an almost perfectly preserved fresco. A man and a woman, mid-embrace. Their bodies relaxed, not posed. Not dramatic, just real. Their eyes are locked. You recognise something in that gaze. That raw, curious wonder you've only seen in mirrors, and rarely even then. This is where the body was allowed to speak, she says, before they made silence a virtue. And this is where the ritual begins, not with incense, not with oil, but with story. She begins to tell you the history of the Lover's Wall, a nickname passed down through fragmented oral tradition, not its real name. That's been lost. But the stories remain. How this house was once home to a woman known as Livia Silvana, a respected courtesan who opened her doors not just to lovers, but to those who needed to be witnessed. People came not for her body, but for what happened in front of that wall. They would lie together, not always touching, sometimes barely clothed, and simply allow themselves to be seen, fully, without performance, without pretending. Most people, the woman says, don't know what they look like when they want. You're shown a mirror, small bronze, cracked at the edge. She places it in your hand and kneels before you, not as a supplicant but as a guide. Her eyes never leave yours. Don't touch yourself yet, she says, not until you've watched yourself wanting. So you do. You hold the mirror. You look. At first it's nothing, a face, skin, familiar features made unfamiliar in candlelight. But then you notice the flicker, the way your breath changes, the way your jaw shifts when she leans just a little closer, the way your pupils dilate. Desire is not loud here, it's honest. And that honesty is the rite. Here's your historical grounding. Pompeii was a city unashamed of pleasure. Erotic frescoes weren't tucked away. They adorned public bathhouses, atriums, even bakeries. The house of the Vetii, recently excavated, includes detailed imagery of divine copulation, not as scandal, but as celebration. It was believed that pleasure attracted favour, prosperity, even fertility for the household. But the most intimate murals, like those found in hidden cubicula, suggest that certain rooms were used for deeply personal rites, not brothels, sanctuaries, you understand now. The woman leans in and asks, "What do you see when you're not trying to be seen?" And suddenly the answer pours out of you, not in words, in tears, in breath, in trembling shoulders and hands that no longer know what to hold on to. She takes the mirror gently and sets it aside. Then, without ceremony, she begins to undress, not as an invitation, but as an offering. "I will lie with you," she says, "but not as a lover, as a reflection." You lie beside each other, not touching, just being, breath for breath, thought for thought, until your bodies begin to echo one another, knees bent, fingers twitching, a slow roll of the hips, not to seduce, to synchronize. This isn't sex. It's restoration. And here's your fringe fact. Some archaeologists believe that certain homes in Pompeii were used as dream houses, where patrons would undergo erotic healing through guided touch and mirrored sensation. There are theories, unproven of course, that these rites were based on ancient Etruscan practices and that the frescoes acted not as decoration but as energetic portals, memory triggers, emotional relays. You believe it now. Your body remembers something as you lie there. A version of yourself that didn't flinch at desire, that didn't apologize for longing, and for a moment you see yourself the way the fresco sees you. Not in pieces, whole. The woman presses a kiss to your temple, not sexual, not maternal, something in between, and rises. She doesn't speak again. She simply leaves you with the mirror. As you step back into the ruined city, the sun is beginning to set. Shadows stretch long across the stone streets. You pass tourists who don't look twice, but the walls know. You carry the mirror with you now, not in your hand, but somewhere behind your ribs. It isn't bronze or cracked anymore. It's become something internal. A quiet reflector humming beneath your skin, showing you things you hadn't dared to look at before. And as you continue further inland, the land grows rougher, more ancient, more weathered by worship. Gone are the painted villas and delicate mosaics. What lies ahead is carved from the bones of the earth itself. You're in Anatolia now. The air is sharper here, the soil redder, the sky heavier, almost metallic, like a storm waiting in its lungs. You walk until you reach the edge of a cliffside gorge, where a stone stairwell descends into a crack between two mountains. No signs, no offerings, just wind, rock, and silence so thick you can feel it press against your chest. Down the steps you go, and down, until the light disappears completely. And the darkness becomes something tactile, like velvet soaked in ash. At the bottom, a flicker, a single torch, and beside it, a man dressed in rough black linen. His face is streaked with soot, his eyes rimmed in red. He doesn't speak, only nods and gestures toward the iron gate behind him. As it creaks open, the heat rolls out, not just warm, but wet. The scent hits next. Blood, sweat, perfume, and something else. Sweet and acrid, like scorched fruit. You've arrived at the womb chamber of Cybele, the mother of mountains, the Great One, the Devourer, the Creator. Cybele's cult was one of the oldest in the ancient world, and certainly among the most feared. The Greeks tried to civilize her, the Romans tried to legalize her, and none of them fully succeeded. Because Cybele was never meant to be tamed. Her rites weren't designed for comfort, they were meant to break you open. And that's exactly what's about to happen. The chamber is circular, lit by a ring of fires, with a pit in the centre filled with rose petals, black feathers, and dried thorns. Around the edges, initiates kneel, bodies bare or draped in torn silks, their mouths moving in silent chant. One of them notices you and begins to hum a low, pulsing note that sends a vibration up through your feet and into your spine. You're not asked to strip, you're told to shed. Not just clothing, everything. Your name, your history, your identities. You're offered a knife, not for cutting skin, but for symbol. You touch it to your wrist or your chest, your lips. It's not sharp, but it's heavy, ancient. Your guide takes it back and marks your forehead with soot. "Now you bleed inwards," he says, and the ritual begins. You're led to the edge of the pit, and the firelight casts your shadow long and strange. A woman rises from the centre, her body covered in crimson paint and scars that are clearly not symbolic. She wears a headdress made of bone and leather, and her voice, when it breaks the silence, is not just sound, it's pressure. "Do you come to suffer?" she asks. "No," you say, without knowing why. "Do you come to know?" You hesitate, then nod. She gestures you into the pit. The petals are warm, wet, slick with old offerings. You kneel, then lie flat on your back, your arms spread wide, the feathers brushing your ribs. You feel like prey, and yet not afraid. Above you the initiates begin to chant, and this is where the pleasure begins, not in a climax or a kiss, but in rage, in heat, in the permission to feel everything your body has been told to hide, your fear, your want, your grief, your hunger. The priestess climbs into the pit with you and places her hand on your heart. Not tender, firm. Give me the thing that eats you. And you do. You sob, you writhe. You let your back arch, your legs shake, your mouth spill things you didn't even know were still lodged in your throat. And all around you the fires answer, rising higher, crackling like applause. The priestess leans down and presses her lips to your temple. Her mouth is hot, not from lust, from knowing. This is orgiastic healing, not sexy, but sacred. Not erotic for others, but for you, and it's ancient. In the original rites of Cybele, especially those held in Phrygia and later Rome, men known as Galli would undergo castration, ecstatic dance, and bloodletting to symbolically merge with the divine feminine. But what most forget is that not all participants bled with blades. Some bled through release, through the messy, wild, and sensual confrontation with what lay buried in their skin. And here's your quirky fact. A broken inscription once found in a cave near Pessinus, Cybele's central temple site, refers to a rite known as flamme intus. The flame within. Initiates were said to be burned, but not consumed, through the friction of touch, sound, and self-witnessing. Some scholars think this was a metaphoric rebirth. Others believe it was an intense ritual involving multiple initiates sharing touch, not sexually but cathartically, until each one had purged what they no longer wished to carry. That's what's happening now. You're not being healed, you're being peeled, and underneath the layers, you find something shockingly soft. The priestess guides your hands to your own body, not to provoke, but to soothe. You're told to hum, to match the vibration around you. And as your voice joins the others, you feel your bones begin to remember that you were once a creature, that you once belonged to your body, that you were not always fragmented. The climax comes not from sex, but from stillness, a full-body surrender. The fires go out, the room goes quiet, and you lie in the pit, breathless, emptied, not broken, but hollowed. You're lifted from the petals by 4 initiates, washed with warm water and anointed with a mixture of ash and crushed herbs. You're given a new name. You're not told what it is, but you feel it press against your skin like a second shadow. And here's the final touch. The priestess gives you a piece of obsidian, much like the one you received in Sheba, but this one is jagged, irregular, so sharp. For cutting, she says, not yourself, just your leash. You step back out into the mountain wind, and when you breathe, it doesn't feel like you're inhaling air. It feels like you're tasting freedom. You don't speak for a while after leaving the womb chamber, not because your throat hurts, though it does, but because language feels like the wrong tool. You've spent your life chiseling your truth into the shapes of words, and for once you've found something that doesn't need carving. It's already whole, so you walk in silence, barefoot, the jagged obsidian tucked against your palm, your skin still dusted with ash and clinging petals. The air is cleaner now, cooler, as if the mountain exhaled something poisonous the moment you emerged from its throat. You follow the wind until it carries salt again. A new island rises on the horizon, not shrouded in mist or cloaked in legend, but warm and immediate, heavy with colour and the pulse of drums. The water here isn't calm, it's alive, the kind that slaps at your ankles as if testing your readiness. You're not in the Mediterranean anymore, you're not even in Eurasia. This is Polynesia, specifically an archipelago that doesn't appear on most maps because the rites performed here were never written. They were etched into skin. You are met on the shore by a group of men and women, all bare-chested, their torsos wrapped in patterned cloth, their skin covered in black ink that ripples with every step they take. Their leader steps forward, a person who may be a man or maybe a woman, or maybe something else entirely. They wear their body like a crown, not trying to prove or hide anything. Their eyes land on you and stay there, steady as the tide. You've come for the mark, they say. Not a question. A truth. You nod. They smile. Then you'll need to bleed before you can rise. And so it begins. You're taken to a longhouse built from woven palms and volcanic stone. Inside, the air hums with incense, salt, and the faint sting of something sterile, though you know no steel instruments will be used here. You lie down on woven mats, while the priest, tattooist really, though that word doesn't do them justice, prepares the tools, bone combs, shark teeth, wooden mallets, and a bowl of dark ink made from soot and ground coconut shell. It smells sweet, earthy, and just slightly like burned sugar. This is not decoration, they tell you. This is memory. And then they begin. The first strike surprises you, not in the pain, but in the intimacy. It's not the sharpness that pierces you, it's the intention. Each tap is a prayer, each line a story, and it's not random. The design has already been chosen, not by them, not even by you, by your body. They read you like a tide chart, the curve of your shoulder, the tension in your jaw, the story your breath tells when it stutters. Your pattern reveals itself slowly, as if it's always been there, waiting under your skin for someone with the right language to draw it out. You don't cry, not because it doesn't hurt, but because it does, and that's the point. Here's your historical grounding. In pre-colonial Polynesia, tattoos, called tatau, moko, or pe'e, depending on the region, were not just rites of passage, but sacred contracts. They marked spiritual maturity, sexual potency, divine lineage, and social rank. Some were tied to fertility rites, others to erotic initiation. The process was always painful, always prolonged, but it was never considered mutilation. It was transformation, a conversation between the flesh and the divine. You're not told to endure, you're told to feel. With every tap of the mallet, more of you opens. You begin to feel yourself lifting, not in body, but in awareness. At some point, the pain becomes music, then mantra, then pleasure. Not the easy, slick kind, the kind that earns its way in through fire. The tattoo wraps from your hip bone to your navel, curling like a wave that breaks and reforms itself. It depicts no animal, no god, just motion, flow. The part of you that has always moved toward light, even in darkness. When they finish, you're given a cloth soaked in seawater and hibiscus to press against the fresh ink. It stings like regret. It also feels like coming home. Then the second part begins. You're taken to a smaller hut at the edge of the village, where the ocean meets jungle. Inside is a woman, older but luminous. Her hair is long, silver, and wet, as if she's just come from the sea. She motions for you to sit on the mat beside her. No ceremony, no speech. She lifts the edge of your cloth and examines your tattoo, nods once, then asks, "Do you want to learn how to carry it?" You say yes, and she teaches you, not through lecture, through touch, through breath, through an erotic ritual that doesn't begin with desire, but with awareness. She guides your hand to your tattoo and instructs you to trace the pattern as you breathe, not to arouse, but to connect. She takes your other hand and places it on her own abdomen, where her own ink coils like smoke. Her breath deepens. So does yours. You begin to move, not toward each other, but in tandem. The ink is not just art, it's invitation. A map of where to press, where to pause, where to let sensation echo through generations. And here's your fringe fact. Some Polynesian societies believe the tattoo acted as a spiritual organ, an extra set of lungs or a second heart. In certain erotic rites, partners would breathe into each other's tattoos, activating them through moaning, chanting, or even the act of drawing them with tongues. A tattoo wasn't finished until it had been awakened. You awaken yours now. Her mouth meets your chest just above the top edge of the ink. She kisses, breathes, hums something that feels like a lullaby but tastes like salt. The sensation rolls downward through the tattoo into your gut, into your hips, and you feel your entire pelvis shudder. Not from climax, from recognition. This is who you are now. You leave the hut just before dawn. The pain in your side a steady throb, the ink covered with a thin paste of oil and ash. You are told not to wash for 3 days, not to speak your old name, not to share what happened in the hut. You don't plan to. Some pleasures aren't meant to be explained, only carried. The sun rises like it's been watching you all night, rising slow and gold over the edge of the water, as if it too wants to take its time this morning. You step into the surf carefully, the ache of your new tattoo pulsing with each heartbeat. The salt water bites, yes, but the pain is welcome now. It's proof. You walk deeper until the waves kiss your thighs, and then you pause. Not to cleanse, not to finish anything, just to be still. Something in you wants to stay, but the wind says otherwise. You follow it across the ocean, west again, past coral reefs and volcanic chains, past islands that speak in green and gold until the temples rise out of the jungle like dreams half remembered. The stone is dark here, volcanic, soft at the edges, alive with moss and memory. Vines snake around carvings, not erasing them but emphasizing them, like lovers pressing fingertips into old scars. You've arrived at Angkor. Not the Angkor of sunrise selfies and guidebook checklists. Not the Angkor of monks posing beside tourists and elephant pants. This is deeper. A section of temple that doesn't exist on any official path. The entrance is narrow, half choked by roots, guarded by 2 lion statues worn smooth by centuries of touch. You pass between them and feel your breath hitch, like something just slid down your throat and whispered welcome. The air inside is damp, cool, heavy with jasmine and old incense. And everywhere are the Apsaras. They dance across the walls in bas-relief, dozens, maybe hundreds of them. Hair piled high, hips cocked at angles that speak a language no school ever taught. Smiles like secrets. Fingers curled in positions you don't recognize but instantly understand. These are not saints, they are not seductresses, they are invitations. A woman emerges from the shadows, barefoot, tall, ageless. She wears a layered silk sampot in shades of rust and ochre, and her hair falls down her back in a thick braid. Her body is adorned with gold bangles and strings of jasmine buds. Her eyes are rimmed in kohl, and she moves like she was born from the same stone the temple was carved from. She doesn't bow, she tilts, just slightly, just enough to say, "You've arrived." She leads you through narrow passages, beneath archways carved with entwined serpents and celestial dancers. She speaks little, but when she does, it's in a whisper that makes you want to lean in too close. The Apsaras aren't statues, she tells you. They're records of pleasure, of memory, of the first touch, the first moan, the first breath after surrender. You reach a chamber lit by narrow shafts of sunlight. There are no altars, no offerings, just a polished stone slab in the centre of the room, and around it, more dancing women carved into the walls. Some are smiling, some are watching. All of them seem to be waiting. "You're not here to pray," the woman says. "You're here to be danced." You lie on the slab, not because she asks, because the walls ask. And this is where the ritual begins, not with touch, but with presence. She moves slowly around you, her ankles ringing softly with tiny bells. Her hips sway, not to seduce, but to weave, as if each motion braids a spell around your body. Her dance is deliberate, measured, an ancient vocabulary passed through centuries of hips and hands and breath. And here's your historical grounding. The Apsaras, those divine dancers of Angkor Wat, were not simply mythological beings. In Khmer tradition, they were embodiments of feminine cosmic energy, often associated with fertility, pleasure, and the liminal space between human and divine. In some interpretations, temple dancers trained in their image performed rites meant to awaken the spiritual body through movement, not through touch but through witnessing. To be danced for was to be blessed, or tempted, or opened. She dances for you, but not only for you, she dances around you, through you. Each sway of her hip pulls tension from your chest. Each roll of her shoulders unwinds the coil at your belly. She lifts a hand and traces a shape in the air above you. A spiral, a circle, a loop, and somehow your body responds without her ever laying a finger on you. You don't know when your breathing deepens. You don't know when your thighs shift apart. But she knows. She kneels at your side now and unrolls a length of silk, deep maroon embroidered with golden lotus blossoms. She drapes it over you, not to cover, but to contain. The cloth is light, but its weight is holy. She places her palm on your heart, and the temple seems to exhale. "This is where you keep it," she says. "What?" "The ache." And suddenly it all rushes in. The longing you've been dragging behind you for miles, the shame you picked up back in your first temple, the thrill you haven't let yourself feel since the forest foxes brushed your skin. All of it. It blooms under her hand like a wound and a garden at once. Here's your quirky fact. Some of the bas-reliefs in Angkor Wat show Apsara's mid-dance, with exaggerated pelvic tilts and flowing hair that, according to some fringe scholars, were visual cues for erotic rituals once performed in the inner sanctums of the temple. These rituals may have involved guided meditation, breathwork, and full-body sensory immersion, led by dancers trained not only in movement, but in subtle touch. They weren't entertainers, they were priestesses of pleasure. Your priestess knows this dance by heart. She doesn't rush, she doesn't undress you, she doesn't need to. because by the time her hands finally meet your skin, you're already open. The silk slips away, and her touch is feather-light, just the pads of her fingers tracing the pattern your own breath has carved into your flesh. She does not bring you to orgasm. She brings you to stillness, to that impossible moment where the mind goes quiet and the body hums, and the entire world is reduced to a single point behind your eyes, pulsing with light. And then she stops. The silence after is not empty. It's sacred. She wraps you again in the silk and presses a small carved charm into your palm. An Apsara no bigger than your thumb, her body mid-dance, her face halfway between laughter and prophecy. For remembering, she says, you sit up slowly, your body humming like a struck bell, and the carvings on the wall seem to shimmer just slightly in the shifting light. As you walk out of the chamber, you notice something new. The Apsaras on the walls, they're still dancing, but now they're dancing with you. You leave the temple with slow feet and a body that feels strangely full of motion, of memory, of some kind of music that doesn't quite fade even once the stone is behind you. The Apsaras cling to your skin like dust, like perfume, like fingerprints. You think of all the people who must have passed beneath them and never noticed the way their hips suggested more than dance, more than devotion. You did, and now that rhythm lives inside your bones. The air thickens as you head west again, past tangled jungle and rust-coloured roads. The landscape flattens, the horizon opens, the wind grows dry and hot, but the scent riding it shifts. Fewer flowers, more smoke, more spice. Eventually the temples return, but they are smaller now, built from brick and mud rather than carved stone. You find yourself in a garden surrounded by tall, rustling reeds and pale bark trees. Hanging fabrics sway like ghosts in the breeze, casting shadows that flicker like candlelight even in the sun. This is a fire temple, not the famous kind from Persia, not the grand Zoroastrian halls with soaring flames guarded by priests in ivory robes. This one is humbler, older, and far more secretive. A local place tended by women whose names never made it into the surviving texts. But the rite you've come for isn't listed in any scripture anyway. You follow a woman into the inner garden. Her feet are bare, dusted with ash. Her face is lined with age, but radiant with something that doesn't belong to time. She wears loose silks dyed red and copper, and smells faintly of cinnamon and sweat. She leads you into a tent, not large, not ornate, but warm. Inside, the floor is layered with thick carpets and silk cushions. A fire burns low in a metal bowl at the centre. Around it are scattered petals, figs, dried apricots, and what looks like pomegranate wine glinting dark in a clay cup. She gestures for you to sit, then she speaks. You've come far carrying other people's fires. You don't deny it. She continues, now we feed your own. She kneels before you and uncovers a small bundle of cloth. Inside are dried herbs, ground seeds, and what looks like powdered resin. She sprinkles it into the fire. The scent hits instantly, spicy, earthy, a little like burnt sugar and salt. Your mouth waters. Your stomach tightens. You're hungry, she says, amused. Not for food. And that's how it begins. The ritual is not elaborate. It doesn't need to be. It's about presence and flame, body, need. She takes your hand and places it near the fire, close enough to feel the heat pulse through your palm, not close enough to burn. Then she does the same with your other hand, then your forehead, then your chest. Fire recognizes fire, she murmurs, and you start to remember just how much of you has always wanted to burn. Here's your historical anchor. In pre-Islamic Persia and surrounding regions, Zoroastrian fire temples were sacred places where the divine was said to dwell within flame. While mainstream rituals emphasize purity and cosmic balance, some lesser-known sects, particularly in isolated mountain communities, believed fire could also be a tool for personal transformation. There are references, sparse and debated, to rites involving erotic awakening through firelight, heat, and intentional arousal. These were not for fertility or sacrifice. They were for remembering the self before shame was taught. That's what this is. The woman removes your outer garment, gently, without fanfare. She drapes a soft cloth over your shoulders and begins to anoint your skin with warm oil. The oil is spicy and sweet, tingling slightly as it soaks into you. She massages it in slowly, your arms, your thighs, your belly, never avoiding intimacy, but never exploiting it either. This, she says, is not to make you desirable, it is to make you felt by yourself. She offers you the wine, you drink, it tastes like heat and memory. And the first time you touch someone and didn't apologise for wanting more, and then comes the pleasure. Not sudden, not explosive, but creeping and dull-daring like embers hidden beneath ash. She moves closer, not to touch, to mirror. She undoes her own robe, revealing a body that does not ask for your approval. It teaches you. Her curves are not ornamental, they're instructional. She begins to move, subtly, softly, just enough to guide your eyes, your breath, your awareness back into your own form. You feel your skin ripple with attention. You're not being seduced, you're being reminded. And here's your fringe fact in one obscure Zoroastrian heretical text unearthed in fragments, mostly burned. There's a mention of the hidden flame ceremony performed by women known as Harazata, meaning those who kindle. These women were not priestesses, nor whores, but something stranger, vessels for divine fire who awakened their partners through breath, heat and intimate reflection. Some accounts suggest they worked in pairs, lighting each other, then others. The woman before you is a Harazata, whether history admits it or not. She breathes with you now in rhythm, she doesn't kiss you, but you feel kissed. Her hands hover over your body like flames without smoke. The heat grows, so does your pulse. You begin to rock gently, barely moving, but enough to build friction between skin and silk, between desire and restraint. It's not about release, it's about containment. Pleasure held, not spent. She leans forward and whispers into your mouth, not words, but breath, and then pulls back. Now, she says, carry it. Your body is still buzzing, but you're not shaking, you're steady. Like a candle that has finally realised it doesn't need to flicker to stay lit. She gives you a small dish of ash. For the places that have gone cold, she explains. You take it, step outside. The garden is quiet, but not still. The wind tugs at your clothes. A fig drops from a branch behind you with a soft thump, and you realise nothing is burning, but everything is on fire. The ash clings to your fingers long after you've left the garden behind. It doesn't blow away, it doesn't smudge, it stays like a shadow that's learned how to speak. You run your thumb along the edge of the small clay dish, and something inside you hums, not a memory, but a readiness, as if your body, freshly lit, has decided it's no longer afraid of its own warmth. The terrain changes again. Good. It always does. This time it flattens into dry scrubland, endless and pale under a white sky. Mountains lurk in the distance, but they aren't threatening. They watch you like quiet elders who've seen everything and have long stopped judging. Your steps grow slower now, not from fatigue, but from something else, something deeper. Reverence, maybe, or anticipation. You're headed into the desert, not a wasteland, a waiting room. And not just any desert. This is the edge of North Africa, where Berber traditions still breathe beneath sand and stone, older than empire, older than alphabets. There is a place here, hidden between rock formations carved by wind and time, where certain women once held rituals no one dared speak of above a whisper. You're not here for a temple, you're here for the tent. It finds you at dusk, low, wide, made of black goat hair fabric stretched tight with wooden stakes. Smoke curls from a hole at the top. The scent hits you before the colour fades from the sky. Amber, musk, dates simmering in honey, and something floral. Neroli, maybe. The doorway is flanked by hanging beads that click in the wind, warning or welcoming. It's hard to tell. You enter. Inside, the light is dim and red, not crimson, deep. The kind of red that feels like you've stepped into someone's mouth. Rugs cover every surface, pillows spill from corners like lazy gods, and seated at the centre, on a small raised platform, is an elder, with eyes like polished onyx and hands covered in henna spirals that wrap around each finger like snakes. You're late, she says, but smiles as she says it. Don't worry, the fire's still hot. You're not alone. Around the edges of the tent are 5 others, varied in age, body, gender, each wrapped loosely in linen, each holding a small ceramic bowl in their lap. They look like they've just remembered something important and are still catching their breath. The elder beckons you forward. You kneel. She touches your forehead, then your chest, then your pelvis. Not with judgment, with recognition. She doesn't ask what you've brought. She already knows. Let's begin, she says. Remove everything that isn't you. So you do. You strip. Not for her, not for them, for yourself. And then you are handed a bowl. It contains a mixture. Thick, dark, aromatic. You dip your fingers in and bring it to your nose. Dates, crushed nuts, honey, rosewater, and what smells like powdered oud. She nods when you taste it. Sweet, seductive, sticky. Not just food, fuel. And here's your historical grounding among some North African nomadic communities, especially certain pre-Islamic Berber tribes. Women held sexual authority not just in domestic spaces, but in spiritual ones. Some anthropologists have recorded accounts, fragmented, whispered, of travelling tents where women practiced body speaking, a ritual in which the senses were awakened through heat, food, touch, and breath, allowing initiates to reclaim pleasure as knowledge, not indulgence. The rites were not public. They were sacred, private, and utterly embodied. The elder begins to sing, not a melody, a rhythm, a cadence that rocks back and forth like a cradle made of hips and wind. The other figures around the tent begin to sway. Bowls in hand, their bodies loosening like silk in warm water. You are not instructed to dance. You are compelled to. It begins in your shoulders, then your ribs, then your thighs. You move slowly, the sweetness from the bowl still coating your tongue. The elder approaches and smears a streak of the paste across your belly, then your lips, then the crease where your hip meets your leg. Now speak from here, she says, pressing her palm low on your pelvis, not from your mouth. The ritual deepens. The other initiates come closer, but no one touches, not directly. Their bodies create heat, friction, invitation. One begins to hum behind you, low and guttural. Another mirrors your breath. The tent becomes an organism and you are its heartbeat. You close your eyes, and this is where the pleasure begins, not in climax or contact, but in response. Your body begins to speak. It murmurs through muscle. It confesses through breath. It sings through sweat. No part of you is still, not because you're being watched, because you're being heard. The elder anoints your back with something cooler now, oil probably. It drips along your spine and pools at the base. Your hips respond instinctively, grinding slowly into the rug beneath you. It is not vulgar, it is not performative, it is truth. And here's your fringe fact. In some Berber dialects, the word for orgasm translates loosely to the body's memory returning. Certain poetic texts, though rarely studied, suggest that erotic rites were sometimes used to awaken ancestral voices, especially in women, through movement and heat. The body was viewed not as a barrier to the divine, but as its most honest translator. You translate now. Moaning, not from friction, from recognition. The elder sits behind you and places her hands gently on your chest, cradling you like a child, a lover, a sacred flame. She begins to chant softly in a language you don't know, but your bones do, she says, and now you are becoming. You don't ask what, you don't need to, you pulse, you radiate, you weep, you open, and finally when the fire has burned low and everyone lies half naked in the heat of the tent, the elder kisses your shoulder and whispers, "You've remembered enough. For now." She hands you a cloth bag. Inside is a small jar of the date honey mixture, for when you forget again. You leave just before dawn, the air still warm with shared breath and sweat and spice. The desert greets you with silence, not empty but full of approval. Your body no longer walks, it carries, and everywhere you go, it speaks. You've crossed continents, worshipped at the lips of dancers, burned your fear in fire temples, remembered yourself in strangers' arms and under the stare of gods. You've been kissed by mirrors, swallowed by queens, bled by ink, and softened by salt. You are no longer following a path. You are the path now. Each breath you take hums with the weight of things once buried, now unearthed, now glowing, now alive. You should feel finished. You don't. There's one place left. No one tells you where to go this time. You just walk. Your feet find dry earth again. Not the volcanic stone of temples or the cracked red of desert. This is older, softer, chalkier. The terrain here doesn't impress. It hides. You move through a plain scattered with jagged hills and occasional outcrops, until one catches your eye. A hill shaped like a breast, half covered in pale grasses and tiny blue flowers. At the base, a tunnel. No carved entryway, no sigils or runes or statues. just a rounded mouth in the stone, slightly too perfect to be natural. There's no sound, no torch, but something in you steps forward anyway. And the darkness accepts you like an old lover. The air is cool, damp, but not cold. It's comfortable, like sheets just pulled from the line and laid over bare skin. The tunnel curves. You keep walking. It gets tighter, not uncomfortably so, but enough to press your awareness into your body. Every shoulder graze, every breath against the walls becomes part of the ritual. Then light. Not torchlight, starlight. You emerge into a circular chamber open to the sky. There are no candles, no incense, just wind and night and the slow spin of constellations above. The stars here seem closer, lower somehow, as if they've bent down to listen. And in the middle of the chamber is a shallow pool, ringed with smooth stones and strange markings in a language you can't decipher but feel in your bones. A woman waits. She's seated beside the pool, cloaked in something gossamer, translucent. Her hair is white, but her face is young, not by age, but by aura. She looks like someone who's never had to explain herself. She gestures to the water. "This is the last place," she says. "Not because it's the end, because it's where endings don't matter anymore." You approach slowly. The water is warm, not heated by flame, but by the deep pulse of the earth itself. As you step in, coat your ankles, your knees, your thighs, welcoming you with a silence deeper than sound. You sink to your waist and feel your breath shift. Your shoulders drop. This is not a bath. This is entry. "Lie back," she instructs. "Let the sky see you." So you do, and this is where the final pleasure begins. Not from movement, not from heat, not from breath, from stillness, from weightlessness, from being held by something that neither demands nor offers, only witnesses. The stars are spinning above you. Your skin glows faintly with the reflection of constellations. She begins to chant. It's barely audible. A series of syllables that feel like they've been spoken by 1,000 mouths before hers, and will be spoken by 1,000 more. They aren't words, they're keys. And something inside you unlocks. Not a door, a memory of yourself. Before the shame, before the masks, before the endless reshaping of your body to fit spaces too small and eyes too sharp, you see yourself, floating, whole. And here's your historical grounding. In ancient Egypt, dream temples, also called sleep sanctuaries, were used for ritual healing, erotic vision quests, and divine communication. Patients or initiates would sleep in sacred chambers, often under the open sky after consuming herbs or performing sensual rites, hoping to receive messages through dreams. Some were guided, some were left alone. All were considered traversals, ritual crossings between waking and sacred space. You are traversing now. The woman dips her hand into the water and brings a palmful to your lips. It tastes like nothing and everything, sweet, mineral, metallic, electric. Your body hums. Your skin, stretched over memory, begins to pulse with its own rhythm, slower than a heartbeat, more ancient, like the beat of the first drum, like the pulse that began before birth and will end only when the stars themselves go dark. The woman begins to sing now, not at you, but for you. A lullaby that feels like it's being sung in a language older than time. The water vibrates with her voice. So does your chest, your sex, your scalp. And then comes the final release. Not an orgasm, not a scream, not even a cry, just a melting of story, of identity, of even the idea of you. You are not disappearing, you are dissolving into everything. And here's your fringe fact. Some dream temple records, discovered on broken tablets and half-legible scrolls, describe erotic visions not as distractions, but as sacred clues. It was believed that the divine would only speak in symbols your body understood. Pleasure wasn't a sin, it was the translation. You understand everything now, but you can't explain it, and that's the point. When you finally sit up, the stars are still above you. But they seem calmer somehow. You leave the pool, wrap yourself in a robe of soft linen left at the edge, and the woman places something in your palm, a round stone still wet from the pool with a spiral carved into it. The centre is not where you begin, she says. It's where you return to. She doesn't follow you back through the tunnel. You don't expect her to. Outside, the night is still vast, the earth still quiet. But you walk now with a new kind of silence inside you. Not the kind that avoids, the kind that knows. And you smile. Not because it's over, but because you finally stopped searching. So now, here you are, at the edge of myth, body still humming from the rites, skin etched with ink, lips kissed by fire and memory and moonlight. You've walked through chambers that never show up on maps, bathed in starlight, been undone by dance and silence alike. Not all of it was pleasure, not all of it was soft, but every moment shaped you, taught you how to listen to the parts of yourself no history book ever mentions. And what did you find? That desire isn't a sin, it's a compass. That sacred doesn't always mean still or clean or restrained. Sometimes sacred is messy. Sometimes sacred is sticky fingers and shaking legs and a laugh that escapes your throat before you even realize it's yours. Sometimes it's surrendering to your own heat just long enough to remember you were never meant to be cold in the first place. The temples are behind you now. The priests and priestesses have faded into dusk. The ink has dried. The scars have closed. The fire is banked but never extinguished. Because what they gave you was never meant to be held inside stone walls. It was always meant to be carried forward. So take it. Take the smoke-slick mirrors and the whispers in the dark. Take the belly-deep moans and the soft pressure of a stranger's breath on your collarbone. Take the carvings, the chants, the honey, the heat. Take all of it. Let it echo through you, not as a secret, but as a song. Because you're not just the one who walked through the temples. You're the temple now, and somewhere out there, someone's already looking for the doorway into you.